Welcome, fellow dreamer. Tonight, we journey across ancient waters, tracing humanity's first bold ventures upon the seas. From a simple reed boats gliding along riverbanks to the mighty triremes that ruled the waves, we'll explore how the Phoenicians, Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans transformed the ocean into highways of discovery, trade, and adventure. This tale unfolds accompanied by gentle music and softly shifting imagery, revealing forgotten marvels and captivating moments from our seafaring past. Let these stories nourish your curiosity as you drift peacefully towards sleep. So take a deep breath, settle into the comfort that surrounds you, and allow your mind and eyes to rest. The story of the seas is ready to carry you away. In the beginning, there was water and wonder. Long before the first vessel ever floated upon a river's surface, before any sail caught wind or oar disturbed a lake's mirror calm stillness, our earliest ancestors stood at the edges of the world and gazed outward. They watched the endless rhythms of waves meeting shore, the patient flow of rivers carving their paths through ancient landscapes, the mysterious depths where sunlight dissolved into darkness. Water was everywhere, yet it remained a boundary, a threshold between the known and the unreachable. Imagine, if you will, a time some 50,000 years ago when small groups of humans moved across landscapes following the seasonal migrations of animals and the ripening of wild plants. These were people much like us in their curiosity and problem-solving abilities, their capacity for wonder and their determination to survive. They noticed, as we still notice today, that life gathered near water. Rivers teemed with fish that could be speared or trapped in the shallows. Lake shores attracted herds of animals that came to drink at dawn and dusk. Coastal areas offered shellfish clinging to rocks, seabirds nesting in accessible colonies, and the mysterious bounty that tides left behind. Archaeological evidence from these distant times reveals something fascinating about our ancestors' relationship with water. In caves and rock shelters near coastlines, researchers have discovered the remains of meals that speak of sophisticated harvesting from aquatic environments. Shells carefully opened, fish bones bearing marks of cleaning and preparation, the detritus of coastal living stretching back tens of thousands of years. These findings suggest that early humans were not merely land-dwelling creatures who occasionally ventured to water's edge, but communities intimately familiar with aquatic resources and the rhythms of tides and seasons. Yet water presented a fundamental challenge. A river might separate a community from rich hunting grounds on the opposite bank. A lake could hold an island visible in the distance, perhaps offering safety from predators or access to bird colonies. The ocean stretched beyond sight, and along its margins, floating objects drifted past on currents. Logs from distant forests, tangles of vegetation, even the occasional large marine creature. Observant eyes watched these things move across the water's surface without sinking, and minds that had learned to shape stone tools and harness fire began to wonder. The earliest coastal settlements that archaeologists have identified show evidence of this wandering translated into observation. In what is now South Africa, Sites dating back more than 100,000 years reveal that people were systematically gathering shellfish and marine resources. The coast of the Mediterranean, the shores of ancient lakes in Africa's Great Rift Valley, the river valleys of Asia, all these places show traces of human communities learning to read the water, understanding its moods and offerings. These early peoples developed knowledge that would later prove essential for seafaring. They learned to predict weather patterns by observing clouds and winds. They understood seasonal changes in water levels, the annual flooding of rivers that brought both danger and fertility. They noted how different materials behaved in water, some sinking immediately, others floating for a time before becoming waterlogged, still others remaining buoyant indefinitely. This wasn't abstract science, but practical wisdom essential for survival, passed from one generation to the next through demonstration and story. Consider the simple observation that would eventually revolutionize human capability, the realization that a floating object could support weight. A person wading through shallow water might grasp a floating log for support and discover that it bore them up, making movement through deeper water possible. A child playing at a stream's edge might place stones upon a piece of bark and watch it float downstream, a tiny cargo vessel in miniature. These moments of discovery happen not once but countless times, in different places, among different peoples, each instance adding to the accumulated understanding of water and buoyancy. The need to cross water became more pressing as human populations grew and dispersed. A band of hunter-gatherers following game might find their path blocked by a swollen river. The most direct route to a seasonal camp might require crossing a lake. Resources visible on the far shore, whether food, materials, or simply unexplored territory, beckoned to minds curious about what lay beyond the immediate horizon. And so necessity combined with curiosity to create the conditions for innovation. In the quiet moments of evening, when communities gathered around fires, imagine the conversations that must have occurred. Stories about the person who clung to a log and crossed the river. Discussions about the behavior of different woods, some heavy and quick to sink, others light and reliably buoyant. Observations about hollow reeds and how bundles of them seem to float even better than solid wood. The accumulated wisdom of careful watching and testing, success and failure, gradually building toward deliberate experimentation. We must be careful not to imagine a single moment of invention, a lone genius who suddenly conceived the idea of a boat. Instead, watercraft emerged from this long relationship between humans and water, this patient accumulation of knowledge and need. Different communities facing different challenges developed different solutions. The path from standing at water's edge to confidently venturing upon its surface was not a single leap, but countless small steps taken over generations in many places, by many hands. The wonder remained, though, even as understanding grew. Water continued to inspire that primal response. The recognition of something powerful, essential, mysterious, and beautiful. Even today, despite all our modern knowledge and technology, we feel something of that ancient awe when we stand before the ocean or a great river. Our ancestors felt it more intensely still, knowing less, but observing more carefully. Their survival depending on reading the natural world with precision and respect. As seasons turned and millennia passed, that patient observation began yielding practical applications. Somewhere, someone looked at a floating log with new eyes, seeing not just an accident of nature, but a tool waiting to be used. The boundary that water represented began to seem less absolute, more permeable. The unreachable started to come within reach. And from those small beginnings, humanity's great adventure upon the waters would emerge, starting with the simplest experiments in staying afloat. The morning sun painted golden streaks across calm water as an early human stood at the river's edge, watching something curious. A fallen tree trunk floated past, drifting with a gentle current that would have swept away anyone trying to swim. On top of this natural raft sat a small animal, perhaps a squirrel or a fox, riding safely downstream without the slightest effort. This simple observation, repeated countless times across countless generations in different parts of the world, planted a seed of understanding that would change humanity forever. Wood floats. This fundamental truth must have seemed almost magical to our ancestors. Heavy stones sank immediately. Mud dissolved into murky clouds. But wood, even substantial logs from the largest trees, bobbed on the surface as if held by invisible hands. Someone, somewhere, must have been the first to act on this knowledge, to intentionally grasp a floating log and feel how it supported their weight in the water. We will never know that person's name or exactly when this moment occurred, but archaeological evidence suggests it happened independently in many different places, as various human populations living near water made the same discovery. The earliest attempts were surely modest. A person might have simply held onto a log while crossing a stream, kicking their legs to propel themselves forward. The log became a tool, transforming a dangerous swimming expedition into something more manageable. But human ingenuity rarely stops at the first solution. If one log could support a person, what about two logs bound together? What about 3 or 4? In regions where tall reeds grew abundantly along riverbanks and marshlands, people experimented with bundling these plants together. Reeds, though individually fragile, possessed remarkable buoyancy when gathered in large bunches. Patient hands learned to collect armfuls of dried reeds and bind them tightly with whatever cordage was available, perhaps strips of plant fiber or twisted grasses. These bundles, when secured side by side, created platforms that could support not just a single person, but also cargo, tools, and supplies. The construction of these early rafts required no specialized tools, no advanced technology, just observation, experimentation, and the accumulated wisdom gained through trial and error. When a raft fell apart mid-crossing, the builder learned to bind the materials more securely. When one end rode too low in the water, adjustments in weight distribution provided the solution. Each generation refined the techniques, passing down knowledge through demonstration and practice. Different environments inspired different solutions. In forested regions, people worked with logs of varying sizes, learning which types of wood offered the best buoyancy and durability. Some woods became waterlogged and heavy after extended exposure, while others maintained their floating properties season after season. Near bamboo groves, hollow stems provided excellent flotation and could be lashed together with remarkable strength. In colder climates where ice flows demonstrated the principle of flotation in frozen form, people adapted local materials to achieve similar results. The creation of a basic raft represented more than just a practical achievement. It demonstrated humanity's growing ability to manipulate the natural world deliberately, to take separate elements and combine them into something with new properties and purposes. A bundle of reeds lying on shore served little function, but that same bundle, properly bound and placed on water, became transportation. This transformation from raw material to functional tool marked an important step in technological development. These early watercraft opened new possibilities for Neolithic peoples. Rivers that had served as barriers could now be crossed more easily, allowing communities to expand their territories and access resources on opposite banks. Fishing became more productive when nets could be deployed from stable platforms rather than from precarious positions on muddy shores. The effort required to move heavy objects decreased dramatically when they could be loaded onto rafts and floated downstream rather than carried overland. Archaeological evidence of these earliest watercraft remains scarce, as organic materials like reeds and wood decay relatively quickly, especially in wet environments. However, researchers have found indirect evidence in the form of ancient settlements on islands that could only have been reached by watercraft, and depictions in rock art showing simple vessels on rivers and lakes. Some of these images, created thousands of years ago, show platforms supporting multiple human figures, suggesting that raft technology had already reached a degree of sophistication. Experimental archaeology has provided valuable insights into how these early craft might have performed. Modern researchers have constructed rafts using only materials and techniques available to Neolithic peoples, then tested them on rivers and lakes. These experiments demonstrate that even simple log rafts, when properly constructed, can carry substantial loads and remain stable in moderate currents. Reed rafts, though requiring more frequent maintenance as the reeds absorbed water and began to deteriorate, proved surprisingly capable for short-distance travel. The psychological barrier broken by these first floats may have been just as important as the physical achievement. Once people understood that they could venture onto water safely, supported by their own creations, the waterways transformed from obstacles into pathways. A river became not just a source of drinking water and fish, but a highway connecting distant places. Lakes offered access to islands and shorelines that held resources and opportunities. The mental map of the landscape expanded to include aquatic dimension. As communities gained experience with these basic craft, they began to consider improvements. A simple raft drifted with the current, or required poles to push against the river bottom in shallow areas. But deeper water demanded different solutions. Some enterprising individuals discovered that a flat piece of wood could be used as a paddle, pulling the water to create forward motion. This innovation, simple as it seems, represented a crucial development in human control over watercraft, allowing travel upstream and providing directional control independent of currents. The knowledge of raft construction spread along waterways and across landscapes as people migrated, traded, and shared ideas. Different communities adapted the basic concept to their specific needs and available materials, creating regional variations. Some rafts were designed for a single crossing and then disassembled, their components reused for other purposes. Others were maintained as permanent community resources, pulled onto shore when not needed, and launched again whenever someone required passage. These humble beginnings, these first deliberate attempts to create floating platforms from natural materials, set in motion a journey of innovation that would span millennia. The raft builders of the Neolithic period could not have imagined the ships their distant descendants would construct, yet every maritime achievement that followed built upon their foundational discovery, that with ingenuity and effort, humans could leave the shore behind and venture onto the water, supported by their own creations. Along the fertile banks of the Nile, where the annual floods deposited rich silt and the river's steady current connected a civilization that stretched for hundreds of miles, the ancient Egyptians developed a relationship with water transport that would shape their entire culture. The papyrus reed, that tall, elegant plant that grew in dense thickets along the river's edge and in the marshy delta regions, became the foundation for some of humanity's most ingenious early watercraft. The papyrus plant itself was remarkably suited to boat construction. Its triangular stems, which could grow to heights of 15 feet or more, contained a pithy interior that trapped air within countless tiny pockets. This natural buoyancy made papyrus an ideal building material for floating vessels, and the ancient Egyptians recognized this property as early as 4,000 years before the Common Era. The abundant growth of papyrus throughout the lower Nile Valley meant that materials for boat construction were readily available to communities all along the river. The process of constructing a papyrus boat required both skill and patience. Harvesters would wade into the shallow waters where papyrus grew thickest, cutting the green stems near their base during the optimal season when the reeds contained the most air and remained most flexible. The freshly cut papyrus would then be gathered into bundles, with the stems carefully aligned so that their natural taper ran in the same direction. These bundles formed the basic building blocks of the vessel. The binding techniques developed by Egyptian boat builders demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of materials and forces. Workers would take lengths of rope, often made from twisted papyrus fibers themselves, and wrap them tightly around the reed bundles in precise patterns. The binding had to be tight enough to hold the reeds firmly together, yet applied in such a way that it did not crush the delicate stems and compromise their buoyancy. Multiple bundles would be lashed side by side to create the main body of the boat, with careful attention paid to shaping the craft. The distinctive shape of papyrus boats emerged from both practical necessity and the natural characteristics of the reeds. The bow and stern typically curved upward, sometimes quite dramatically, rising well above the waterline. This design feature served multiple purposes. The upturned ends helped the boat ride over small waves and prevented water from splashing aboard as the vessel moved through the river. The curved shape also made the boat easier to beach on muddy shores and to pull up onto the riverbank when not in use. Some larger vessels had these curved ends bound so tightly and so high that they resembled the horns of cattle, a shape that appears frequently in ancient Egyptian art. The smallest papyrus boats were simple affairs, suitable for a single fisherman. These modest craft might be only 6 or 8 feet in length, consisting of just 2 or 3 bundles of reeds bound together. A lone fisher could push such a boat into the water, settle himself amid the reeds, and paddle out into the river's quieter sections to cast nets or set lines. The shallow draft of these little vessels allowed them to navigate into marshy areas where fish gathered among the reeds, places larger boats could never reach. As Egyptian boat builders gained experience and confidence, they constructed increasingly larger papyrus vessels. Medium-sized boats could carry several people along with cargo or catches of fish. The construction of these larger craft required more complex binding patterns, with additional rope work running not just around the bundles, but also lengthwise, helping to maintain the overall structural integrity of the vessel as its size increased. Some of these boats stretched 30 feet or more in length and could transport significant loads of goods along the river. The largest papyrus vessels represented considerable engineering achievements. Archaeological evidence and ancient artistic depictions show enormous reed boats that could carry substantial cargo, including pottery vessels, grain, and other trade goods. These impressive craft required the labor of multiple builders working in coordination, carefully shaping and binding perhaps dozens of reed bundles into a cohesive whole. The largest might accommodate a dozen or more people along with their goods, making them crucial to the economic life of communities along the Nile. Propelling these reed boats presented its own set of challenges and solutions. The smallest craft could be moved with simple paddles, or even by hand in very shallow water. Fishermen would sit or kneel on their boats, using their hands or short wooden paddles to maneuver through calm waters. Larger vessels required more organized propulsion. Teams of paddlers might sit along the sides, working in rhythm to move the boat upstream against the Nile's current, or to cross from one bank to another. Some boats used long poles to push against the river bottom in shallower sections, a technique that allowed precise control and steady progress even when moving upstream. The lifespan of a papyrus boat was necessarily limited. Unlike wood, which could last for years or even decades with proper care, papyrus reeds gradually absorbed water despite their initial buoyancy. Over time, the stems would become waterlogged, losing their capacity to float effectively. A well-constructed papyrus boat might serve reliably for several months, or even a year or two, but eventually the reeds would deteriorate. This impermanence was not seen as a significant drawback. However, the abundance of papyrus along the Nile meant that materials for constructing replacement boats were always available, and the skills for building them were widely distributed throughout river communities. The ancient Egyptians used their papyrus boats for purposes that extended far beyond simple transportation and fishing. Small boats carried people between settlements, maintaining connections along the river that served as ancient Egypt's main highway. Hunters ventured into marshy regions to pursue waterfowl, standing carefully in their reed craft as they cast throw sticks or nets. Religious festivals and ceremonies incorporated papyrus boats, with people traveling to temples and sacred sites along the river. Even in death, the papyrus boat held symbolic importance, appearing in tomb paintings and religious texts as vessels that could carry souls through the afterlife. The success of these reed vessels along the Nile demonstrated fundamental principles of boat construction that would influence later developments. Egyptian builders learned how to shape a craft for stability, how to balance load-carrying capacity against ease of propulsion, and how to adapt designs for different purposes. They understood that a fishing boat required different characteristics than a cargo vessel, and they modified their construction techniques accordingly. As generations passed and skills accumulated, These papyrus boats became more sophisticated, even as their basic construction remained rooted in ancient techniques. The knowledge of how to select the best reeds, when to harvest them, how to bind them most effectively, and how to shape them for different purposes became part of the cultural inheritance passed from experienced boat builders to apprentices learning the craft. This accumulated wisdom would provide the foundation for even greater innovations that lay ahead on humanity's journey across the waters. The papyrus reeds that had served the Nile dwellers so faithfully for centuries possessed an inherent limitation. While bundles of reeds could be lashed together to create vessels of surprising size and capability, they eventually became waterlogged. The constant absorption of moisture meant that even the most expertly constructed reed boat had a finite lifespan, requiring the craft to be periodically dried and ultimately replaced. As ancient settlements grew more prosperous and trade became increasingly important to their economies, the need for more permanent vessels became apparent. Wood offered something the reeds could never provide: durability. Trees growing along the riverbanks and in scattered groves presented an entirely different possibility for boat construction. Unlike the flexible, hollow stalks of papyrus, wood was solid, strong, and when properly prepared and maintained, could resist the water's embrace for years rather than months. The transition from reed to timber represented not merely a change in materials, but a fundamental shift in how human beings conceived of their relationship with waterborne vessels. The earliest woodworkers who turned their attention to boat building around 3000 BCE faced challenges their reed-working predecessors had never encountered. A bundle of reeds naturally wanted to float. The air trapped within the hollow stalks provided inherent buoyancy. Solid wood, depending on the species, might float or sink. The craftsman had to develop an understanding of which trees provided suitable material, learning through observation, and undoubtedly some failures which timber worked best for their purposes. In Egypt, where large trees were relatively scarce, builders initially worked with acacia, a hardwood that grew along the Nile in sufficient quantities for boat construction. The wood was dense and durable, though working it required tools and techniques far more sophisticated than those needed for gathering and binding reeds. Mesopotamian boat builders, with different resources available in their river valleys, experimented with their own local timbers, each civilization developing methods suited to their particular materials and needs. The fundamental tool that made wooden boat construction possible was the adze, a cutting implement with a blade set perpendicular to the handle. Unlike an axe, which splits wood along its grain, an adze allowed a craftsman to shape timber with precision, carefully removing material to create curved surfaces and smooth planes. The rhythmic swing of the adze, the steady chipping away of excess wood, became the defining sound of boatyards along ancient rivers. This was a patient work, demanding skill that took years to develop, as the boat builder learned to read the grain of the wood, understanding where it would split easily and where it would resist. Creating a wooden boat required an entirely different conception than bundling reeds. Rather than tying together numerous small elements that collectively provided flotation, wooden boat construction meant shaping large pieces of timber into planks that would be joined edge to edge, creating a watertight hull. The challenge of making wood that grew as straight trunks conform to the curved shapes needed for an efficient boat occupied the thoughts of countless craftsmen. Early wooden boats were often dugouts, created by hollowing out large logs through a combination of fire and scraping. A log would be carefully burned along its length, the char then scraped away with stone or metal tools. The process repeated again and again until a cavity was formed. This method produced sturdy, stable craft, though they were limited by the size of available logs and were extremely heavy, difficult to portage or beach. The dugout represented an intermediate step, using wood but not yet fully embracing the techniques that would define true shipbuilding. The breakthrough came when craftsmen began splitting logs into planks and joining these planks together to form hulls. This innovation multiplied the possibilities enormously, as boats could now be built larger than any single tree trunk, with shapes optimized for speed, cargo capacity, or stability rather than limited by natural log dimensions. The challenge became creating joints between planks that would remain sealed against water pressure. Ancient boat builders developed several ingenious solutions to the problem of watertight seams. Planks were carefully shaped so their edges met precisely, sometimes with overlapping joints where one plank lay partially atop its neighbor, a technique that would later be refined in Northern European clinker-built boats. In other designs, planks met edge to edge, their seams caulked with various materials. Egyptians used a combination of techniques, sometimes packing seams with reeds or papyrus fibers, mixed with pitch or resin collected from certain trees. The internal structure of wooden boats required new thinking about support and reinforcement, while a reed boat's strength came from its bundled nature, with thousands of individual stalks distributing stress throughout the structure. A wooden hull's planks needed to be held in precise relationship to one another. Frames, essentially ribs running perpendicular to the hull's length, provided this structure. Thwarts, wooden crosspieces spanning the hull's width, kept the sides from spreading under the weight of cargo or crew. Joining these structural elements together required techniques for fastening wood to wood. The earliest builders used bindings, drilling or burning holes through timbers, and lashing them with rope made from flax, papyrus, or other plant fibers. Later innovations included wooden pegs driven through drilled holes to pin planks to frames or to join structural elements. These pegs, made from hardwoods and sometimes carved with precision fits that would swell when wet to create even tighter joints, represented sophisticated understanding of wood's properties. The knowledge required for wooden boat construction became specialized expertise, passed from master craftsmen to apprentices through years of practical instruction. Unlike reed boats, which could be constructed by any reasonably skilled person familiar with rope work and binding, wooden vessels demanded specific technical knowledge. The boat builder needed to understand timber selection, the proper seasoning or drying of wood, the particular characteristics of different species, and the complex geometry of hull design. As wooden boats proved their worth, settlements that produced them gained advantages in trade and transportation. A merchant who invested in a well-built wooden vessel acquired an asset that might serve for a decade or more, carrying cargo season after season. The boat itself became valuable property, something that could be maintained, repaired, and eventually passed to the next generation. This durability transformed maritime economics, making longer voyages and more substantial trade ventures practical. The archaeological record preserves tantalizing evidence of these early wooden craft. In some cases, planks or fragments survive, showing tool marks that speak to construction techniques. Ancient tomb paintings and carvings depict wooden vessels with remarkable detail, allowing modern scholars to understand design principles and construction methods. Full-sized boats have been discovered in some locations, deliberately buried or fortuitously preserved, offering invaluable insights into the skills of ancient shipwrights. The emergence of wooden hulls set the stage for everything that would follow in maritime history. The techniques developed in these early centuries of experimentation became the foundation upon which all subsequent boat building would rest. As craftsmen gained confidence in working timber, as tools improved and techniques were refined, vessels would grow larger, more specialized, and more capable. But it all began with those first boat builders who looked at trees and imagined them transformed into craft that could carry humanity across the waters. The wooden boats gliding along the Nile and navigating the rivers of Mesopotamia had transformed human capability, yet they remained bound by a fundamental limitation. Every journey required the steady rhythm of oars cutting through water, the constant exertion of human muscle driving vessels forward. Rowers grew tired, arms weakened. Progress depended entirely on the physical endurance of those aboard, but observing mariners had noticed something that would change everything. The wind moved across the water in patterns as reliable as the rivers themselves. Along the Nile, northern breezes blew consistently during certain seasons, while the current flowed from Nile to north. In Mesopotamia, seasonal winds swept across the flat river plains with remarkable regularity. These invisible forces had always been present, rustling through reed beds, creating ripples on calm water. But now, human ingenuity began to wonder if this natural power might be captured and put to use. The earliest experiments with wind power likely began as accidents or observations. Perhaps a piece of fabric or animal hide left standing in a boat caught the breeze and pushed the vessel forward unexpectedly. Perhaps fishermen noticed how their boats moved differently when reeds or cargo stood upright, catching passing gusts. Whatever the initial spark of insight, people living along the great rivers of Egypt and Mesopotamia began to deliberately test whether wind or fin could propel their craft. The first sails were remarkably simple. Archaeological evidence and ancient artwork suggest that early sailmakers worked with materials already at hand. Woven reed mats, which Egyptians had long used for shelter and floor coverings, could be suspended from a pole. Animal hides, stretched and dried, offered another option. Linen fabric, already being produced from flax plants growing along the Nile's banks, provided a light yet sturdy material that could catch the wind effectively. The basic design that emerged around 3200 BCE was elegantly straightforward. A single pole, or mast, stood upright in the center of the boat, supported by ropes that tied it securely to the hull. Across the top of this mast, a horizontal pole called a yard stretched perpendicular to the boat's length. From this yard, a large rectangular sail hung down, creating a vertical surface that could intercept the wind. Additional ropes allowed sailors to raise or lower the sail and to adjust its angle relative to the wind's direction. These early square-rigged sails worked best when the wind blew from behind or from the side, pushing the boat forward like an invisible hand. The transformation this brought to river travel was extraordinary. A crew that once labored all day at the oars could now sit relatively at rest while their vessel moved steadily upstream or downstream, powered entirely by nature. The energy savings were immense. The efficiency gained meant that boats could travel farther, carry heavier loads, and make journeys that would have been impractical relying solely on human power. Egyptian tomb paintings from the Old Kingdom period, dating to around 2500 BCE, preserve beautiful depictions of these early sailing vessels. The artists carefully rendered boats with tall masts and rectangular sails, sometimes showing the fabrics billowing full with wind, other times hanging loose when winds were calm. These images reveal that sail technology had become thoroughly integrated into Egyptian river life within just a few centuries of its invention. The paintings show sails on cargo vessels, traveling boats, and even ceremonial craft, indicating how widely this innovation had spread. The construction of these early sails required new skills and knowledge. Sailmakers needed to understand how to cut and sew material so it would hang properly and withstand the forces of wind pressure. The fabric had to be strong enough not to tear when filled with a powerful gust, yet light enough to catch lighter breezes. Egyptian linen, woven on simple looms, proved particularly well suited for this purpose. The long fibers of flax created a fabric with both strength and flexibility. Equally important was the rigging, the system of ropes that controlled the sail and held the mast in place. Early rope makers used twisted plant fibers, particularly papyrus and flax, to create lines of varying thickness. The strongest ropes, used to support the mast itself, were thick and carefully braided. Lighter lines controlled the sail's position. Sailors learned through experience how to tie knots that held securely but could be released quickly when needed. The vocabulary of sailing began to develop, with specific terms for each rope and its function. Operating a sail required new skills distinct from rowing. Sailors had to read the wind, understanding its direction and strength by watching ripples on the water's surface, feeling the air on their skin, and observing how plants along the shore moved. They learned to anticipate shifts in wind direction and adjust the sail accordingly. When the wind came from the wrong direction, the sail could be lowered and the crew would return to rowing. But when conditions were favorable, a single sail could do the work of dozens of oarsmen. The mast itself presented engineering challenges. It needed to be tall enough to catch wind flowing above the deck, yet strong enough to withstand the forces exerted when sail fabric filled with a gust. Early masts were made from single tree trunks, selected for straightness and lack of significant branches. In Egypt, where large trees were scarce, wooden poles might be imported from Lebanon or constructed by binding together multiple pieces. The base of the mast sat in a socket or support built into the boat's structure, and the top was held steady by stays, ropes running at angles from the mast's peak to various points on the hull. Mesopotamian sailors developed their own approaches to sail technology, adapted to their river systems and boat designs. The Tigris and Euphrates presented different challenges than the Nile, with more variable currents and different wind patterns. The round coracle boats, distinctive to this region, could be fitted with small sails, though their circular shape made sailing more challenging. Larger Mesopotamian vessels, built with wooden frames, adopted sail designs similar to Egyptian ones, demonstrating how successful innovations spread between cultures through trade and contact. The introduction of sails changed the economics of river transport dramatically. A merchant could now move heavier cargoes with smaller crews, reducing costs. Journey times became more predictable during favorable wind seasons. The range of practical trade expanded as boats could venture farther from their home ports and return with less expenditure of human energy. This efficiency helped fuel the growth of early civilizations, making it easier to move agricultural surplus, building materials and trade goods between communities. As sailors gained experience with wind-powered vessels, they began to understand seasonal patterns. Along the Nile, the prevailing wind typically blew from north to south, while the current flowed south to north. This fortuitous arrangement meant that boats could sail upstream with the wind, then float downstream with the current, either rowing or using a small sail for steering. This natural partnership between wind and water made Egypt's river highway remarkably efficient for two-way travel. The sail represented more than just a technological innovation. It marked a shift in human relationship with natural forces. Rather than fighting against nature through pure muscle power, sailors learned to work with natural energy, understanding patterns and timing their movements to take advantage of what the environment offered. This partnership between human knowledge and natural forces would become a defining characteristic of seafaring, a philosophical approach as important as any technical development. As the sun sets on this chapter of humanity's maritime story, we can imagine an Egyptian boat gliding northward on the Nile's current, its linen sail furled against the mast, rowers resting after a day's journey. Tomorrow, when they turn to head back south, they will raise that sail once more, and the northern wind will fill it like a breath of the gods themselves, carrying them homeward with barely an oar touching water. The conquest of wind had begun, and with it, humanity's reach across the waters would soon extend far beyond the familiar rivers, toward horizons where river and sea merged into one. The Nile River, flowing northward through the heart of ancient Egypt, became far more than a waterway to the civilization that flourished along its banks. It was the lifeblood of an entire culture, shaping every aspect of existence from agriculture to architecture, from religious belief to technological innovation. And nowhere was this relationship more evident than in the remarkable variety of watercraft that plied its waters, each vessel designed with careful consideration for its specific purpose. With the innovation of the sail now transforming how boats could move along the river, the Egyptians developed an increasingly sophisticated understanding of their watercraft. The annual flooding of the Nile, so predictable and yet so powerful, meant that boats needed to serve countless functions throughout the year. During the inundation season, when the river spread across the floodplains, different vessels were required than during the low water months when sandbars and shallows presented navigation challenges. The simplest Egyptian boats remained those built from papyrus reeds, bound together in tight bundles that curved gracefully upward at bow and stern. These craft, which had served the earliest Egyptians so well, continued to be built throughout the civilization's long history. Fishermen used small papyrus skiffs that could be propelled with a single pole in the shallow waters near the riverbanks. The bundles of reeds harvested from the thick stands that grew along the Nile's edges were soaked and then bound with rope made from the same plant, creating vessels that were both lightweight and surprisingly durable. A skilled craftsman could construct such a boat in a matter of days, and while they required periodic drying and maintenance, their simplicity made them accessible to even modest families. But as Egyptian society grew more complex and prosperous, the demands placed upon river transport increased dramatically. Wooden boats, built from imported timber since Egypt's native trees rarely grew large enough for substantial planks, became the vessels of choice for serious cargo transport and official business. Lebanese cedar, brought at great expense from the forests of the eastern Mediterranean, provided the long, straight timbers that Egyptian shipwrights prized. Acacia wood, available locally, served for smaller components and for vessels that did not require the same structural integrity. The construction techniques employed by Egyptian boat builders were remarkable for their ingenuity. Without the use of metal fasteners, which remained scarce and valuable, the shipwrights developed methods of joining planks edge to edge, creating a shell-like structure that was then reinforced from within. Mortise and tenon joints connected the planks, with wooden pegs driven through to hold everything together. The seams between planks were caulked with various materials, sometimes reeds and grass, sometimes a mixture that included beeswax or resin. The result was a hull that could flex slightly as it moved through the water, absorbing the stresses of navigation without cracking apart. These wooden cargo vessels came in various sizes, but some grew remarkably large by ancient standards. Archaeological evidence and tomb paintings reveal vessels capable of carrying enormous loads, including massive stone blocks quarried far up the Nile and destined for pyramid construction or temple building. The logistics of such transport required careful planning. These cargo boats had relatively flat bottoms, allowing them to navigate the shallow stretches of river during low water periods. Their wide beam provided stability for heavy loads. Most dramatically, they relied upon the Nile's unique geography for their operation. The prevailing winds in Egypt blow from north to south, opposite to the river's flow. This fortunate circumstance meant that boats traveling upstream against the current could raise their sails and let the wind do much of the work. Traveling downstream with the current, the sails could be lowered and the boat would drift naturally toward the Mediterranean. This elegant system meant that the Nile was, in effect, a two-way highway where the forces of nature worked in humanity's favor in both directions. The Egyptian hieroglyphs reflect this reality, using a boat with a raised sail to indicate traveling south and a boat without a sail to indicate traveling north. For the wealthy and powerful, boats served purposes beyond mere transportation of goods. Pleasure craft allowed the elite to hunt waterfowl in the marshes, using throwing sticks and trained cats to bring down birds. These hunting boats, depicted in countless tomb paintings, were elegant vessels with decorated hulls and canopies to provide shade. The paintings show nobles standing at the prow, poised to throw, while family members and servants accompany them in scenes of leisure that contrast sharply with the working boats nearby. The religious life of Egypt also demanded specialized watercraft. Funeral processions along the Nile became central to burial practices, with the deceased transported across the river to the necropolis on the western bank, where the sun set into the realm of the dead. Funeral barges were elaborately decorated, carrying not just the mummified body, but also the grave goods, mourners, and priests who would perform the necessary rituals. These solemn processions became defining moments in the journey from life to the afterlife, with the river crossing serving as a powerful metaphor for the transition between worlds. Most remarkable of all were the solar boats, vessels built to serve the deceased king in the afterlife. The famous solar boat of Khufu, discovered in 1954 in a sealed pit near the Great Pyramid, provides extraordinary evidence of Egyptian shipbuilding at its finest. This vessel, over 40 meters in length, was constructed from hundreds of pieces of cedar that had been disassembled and carefully stored. When archaeologists painstakingly reconstructed it, they revealed a ship of elegant proportions, with gracefully curved hull lines and sophisticated joinery. Whether this boat had actually sailed on the Nile before being interred, or whether it was built specifically for burial, remains a subject of scholarly discussion. Either way, it represents the pinnacle of Egyptian wooden boat construction, a vessel fit for a king's journey with the sun god Ra across the heavens. The paintings preserved in tombs provide a window into the busy world of Egyptian river traffic. We see boats of every description sharing the waterway. Cargo vessels heavy with grain, fishing boats with nets spread, papyrus skiffs darting between larger craft, official boats carrying administrators on government business, and military vessels transporting soldiers. The Nile was a constantly moving highway where the entire society could be observed going about its daily business. Through centuries of innovation and refinement, the ancient Egyptians became true masters of river navigation. They understood their watercraft intimately, knowing exactly which vessel suited which purpose, which construction methods provided the necessary strength or flexibility, which crews possessed the skills for different types of navigation. This deep knowledge, born of necessity and refined through generations, created a civilization that existed in harmony with its river, using watercraft as the essential tools that bound together a kingdom stretching hundreds of miles along the Nile's course. As Egyptian maritime knowledge matured, it would not remain confined to the river, but that expansion into new waters and the different challenges it would present belonged to a future that was only beginning to emerge. For now, on the Nile itself, a complete and sophisticated river culture had reached its full flowering. While the great river Nile flowed steadily through a unified kingdom, far to the northeast, another pair of rivers carved their way through a very different landscape. The Tigris and Euphrates descended from distant mountains, carrying snowmelt and seasonal floods through increasingly flat terrain, until they reached the warm waters of the Persian Gulf. Between these two rivers lay Mesopotamia, a name that simply means between the rivers. And here another ancient civilization developed its own distinctive relationship with water. The character of these Mesopotamian rivers differed markedly from the predictable Nile. The Tigris flowed swift and sometimes treacherous, its current capable of surprising even experienced river travelers. The Euphrates moved more gently but shifted its course over the centuries, creating channels and marshlands that required intimate local knowledge to navigate safely. Both rivers swelled with spring floods that could be devastating, arriving with less regularity than the Nile's annual inundation. Yet despite these challenges, the people who settled in this fertile plain recognized that water transportation offered advantages that no land route could match. The earliest Mesopotamian watercraft emerged from the materials readily available in this river environment. In the marshlands where the great rivers spread into wetlands before reaching the sea, reeds grew in extraordinary abundance, just as papyrus did along the Nile. The ancient Sumerians, who established the first cities in this region around 4000 BCE, bundled these reeds into simple boats for navigating the shallow marshes where they hunted waterfowl and gathered fish. These reed boats served well in calm waters and among the channels where marsh Arabs would continue using similar craft for thousands of years to come. But Mesopotamia also offered another material that would lead to a unique contribution to watercraft design: animal hides. The surrounding region supported herding communities, and the Mesopotamians discovered that leather, when properly treated and stretched over a wooden framework, could create a remarkably watertight vessel. This innovation led to the development of the kufa, a round boat that would become one of the most distinctive watercraft of the ancient world. The kufa, which the Greeks would later call a coracle, represented an ingenious solution to the particular challenges of Mesopotamian rivers. These circular vessels were constructed by creating a framework of willow branches or palm ribs bent into a rounded bowl shape. Builders then covered this framework with animal hides, typically from sheep or goats, which had been carefully treated to make them waterproof. The seams where hides joined were sealed with bitumen, a natural tar-like substance that bubbled up from the ground in various locations across Mesopotamia. This remarkable material, which the ancient Mesopotamians called the pitch of the sea, provided an excellent waterproof coating that could seal not only the seams, but the entire outer surface of the vessel. The circular shape of the kufa might seem unusual to those accustomed to the long, narrow design of most boats, but this form offered several practical advantages. The round hull distributed weight evenly in all directions, making the vessel remarkably stable even in choppy water. A kufa could carry an impressive load relative to its size, making it ideal for transporting goods across the rivers. These boats could range from small vessels, barely large enough for one person, to enormous craft capable of carrying several tons of cargo. Ancient sources describe kufas large enough to transport horses and their riders across rivers, while the largest could carry entire merchant caravans with their goods. Operating a kufa required a particular technique. Rather than rowing in the conventional manner, the boatman typically stood in the vessel using a single paddle to propel and steer. The circular boat would spin slowly as it moved across the current, requiring skill to keep it traveling in the intended direction. Despite this seemingly awkward rotation, experienced quafa operators could navigate with remarkable precision, taking advantage of river currents to move heavy loads with relatively little effort. These round boats proved especially valuable for downstream cargo transportation. Merchants could load a large kufa with goods and float downriver from the upstream cities of Assyria toward Babylon and the southern settlements. The journey downstream required less skill than fighting against the current, allowing the transport of heavy cargo, such as grain, dates, pottery, and even building stones. Upon reaching the destination, the practical Mesopotamians had developed an elegant solution to the problem of returning upstream. The hide covering of the kufa could be removed from its wooden framework, rolled up, and carried back overland by pack animal, along with the light wooden pieces. At the upstream origin, the same materials could be reassembled into a new boat for another downstream journey. Alongside these distinctive round boats, the Mesopotamians also built more conventional longboats, particularly for river travel, where direction mattered more than cargo capacity. These vessels used similar construction techniques, with wooden frames covered in hide and sealed with bitumen. Archaeological excavations and ancient artistic depictions show that Mesopotamian boats came in numerous forms, each adapted to specific purposes and conditions. The mighty rivers served as the highways of Mesopotamian civilization. The great cities that arose in this land, from Ur and Uruk in the south to Babylon in the central region, and Nineveh and Asher in the north, all relied on water transportation to move the goods that sustained urban life. Farmers in the countryside loaded their surplus grain onto boats for transport to city markets. Merchants dispatched vessels laden with dates, wool, and manufactured goods between settlements. Perhaps most impressively, the massive construction projects that created the stepped pyramids, called ziggurats, required the transportation of enormous quantities of mud bricks and stone, much of which traveled by water. The waterways of Mesopotamia also connected this civilization to more distant regions. The Euphrates stretched northwest towards Syria and Anatolia, while the Tigris led to the foothills of Armenia and Persia. To the south, both rivers ultimately reached the Persian Gulf, opening possibilities for maritime trade with distant lands. Archaeological evidence shows that by the 3rd millennium BCE, Mesopotamian merchants were engaged in long-distance trade with the Indus Valley civilization, exchanging goods across the waters of the Persian Gulf in vessels that had evolved from simple rivercraft to more substantial seagoing ships. As darkness settles over the ancient rivers and the last kufa of the day beaches on the muddy bank, we can imagine the boatman securing his circular craft and heading home to his rest. The rivers would continue their eternal flow through the night, just as they had flowed for countless generations before and would flow for countless generations to come. These waters, sometimes gentle and sometimes fierce, had shaped a civilization and given rise to unique solutions for traversing their currents. Soon, the knowledge gained on these rivers would embolden sailors to venture beyond the familiar, to leave behind the landmarks of riverbanks and challenge the open waters of the sea. The rivers had taught humanity well. For thousands of years, boats had plied the Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, carrying goods and people along waterways that flowed with predictable rhythms. The currents were knowable. The banks were visible on either side, offering constant reassurance and orientation. When storms arose, a boat could pull to shore. When night fell, vessels could be beached safely until morning light returned. The rivers were generous teachers, but they could only prepare their students for so much. The sea was different. The sea was vast. Around 2500 BCE, we find the first clear evidence of mariners deliberately choosing to leave the sight of land behind them. This transition did not happen suddenly, nor did it occur in a single location. Instead, along various coastlines where river civilizations met the ocean, certain individuals began pushing beyond the familiar embrace of coastal waters. They were driven by curiosity, by the promise of trade, by fish populations that teemed in deeper waters, and perhaps by that essential human quality that has always urged us to discover what lies beyond the horizon. The challenges were immediate and numerous. On a river, the water moves in one direction, shaped by gravity and the contours of the land. The sea moves in many directions at once. Tides pull water toward shore and away from it in cycles that early mariners had to learn to read and anticipate. These tidal movements varied with the moon's phases, creating patterns that seemed mysterious until careful observation revealed their regularity. In some areas, tidal ranges were minimal, rising and falling only slightly. In others, particularly in narrow straits and coastal inlets, the difference between high and low tide could strand a vessel on mudflats or dash it against rocks if a captain misjudged the timing. Waves presented another dimension of difficulty entirely. River waters could certainly become rough during floods or storms, but the wave patterns on open water behaved according to different principles. Wind-driven waves in the open sea could approach from any direction, building in height as they traveled across unobstructed distances. A boat designed to handle the gentle swells of a river might find itself dangerously overmatched when confronted with the rolling waves that march across open water. The hulls had to be higher. The construction had to be stronger. The very shape of vessels required modification to handle waters that lifted and dropped them repeatedly rather than simply carrying them forward. Perhaps most unsettling of all was the absence of landmarks. A river navigator could orient using trees, hills, settlements, distinctive rock formations. Memory and familiarity provided a map, but on the open sea, particularly once the coast slipped below the horizon, all such references vanished. The water looked the same in every direction. A sailor who became disoriented might row or sail for hours in entirely the wrong direction, expending precious energy while moving further from safety rather than toward it. The earliest open water voyages were almost certainly short and tentative. Archaeological evidence suggests that mariners developed their confidence gradually through generations of incremental exploration. They would venture out beyond sight of land for brief periods, perhaps following seabirds that indicated the direction of feeding grounds, and by extension, the way back to shore. They learned to observe the color of the water, which changed with depth, and the nature of the seafloor beneath. Shallow coastal waters might appear light blue or green, while deeper waters took on darker hues. These color changes could serve as warnings or guides. The construction of seaworthy vessels required adaptations that went beyond mere size. Shipwrights discovered that hulls needed more pronounced curves and shapes that could shed water efficiently when waves broke over the bow. The joins between planks required more durable sealing methods. Some builders used resins and pitch derived from trees, creating waterproof barriers that could withstand hours of immersion and the constant working of timbers as waves stressed the hull. Others developed sophisticated joinery techniques, cutting planks to fit together with remarkable precision and then lashing them with rope made from tough fibers. The transition to seafaring also demanded changes in how boats were powered and controlled. Oars that worked perfectly well on a river might prove inadequate against ocean currents and winds. Steering mechanisms had to become more robust. Some early seagoing vessels developed steering oars of greater size and strength, positioned at the stern where a skilled handler could keep the boat oriented properly relative to waves and wind. The timing and coordination of rowing crews became more critical when fighting against swells that could throw off rhythm and reduce efficiency. Sails, too, required refinement for open water use. The simple square sails that caught favorable river breezes needed to be larger and made from more durable materials to be useful at sea. Mariners had to learn entirely new skills about sail management, understanding when to raise full sail, when to reduce sail area to prevent being overpowered by wind, and when to take sails down entirely and rely on oars. The relationship between wind direction, sail position, and the boat's course became a complex calculus that took years to master. Safety considerations took on new dimensions as well. A riverboat might carry food and water for a day's journey. A vessel venturing beyond sight of land needed provisions for extended periods, along with backup supplies in case delays occurred. Fresh water became a critical limiting factor. Unlike river travelers who could simply dip containers into the current, sea voyagers had to carry every drop they might need, calculating carefully based on crew size and journey duration. Running out of fresh water at sea could prove rapidly fatal. Despite these challenges, the advantages of mastering open water navigation were substantial enough to drive continued experimentation and improvement. The sea offered access to resources and trading partners that rivers could never reach. Islands that appeared isolated from a land perspective became connected by maritime routes. Coastal settlements separated by impassable mountains or hostile territories could communicate and trade via water. Fish, particularly larger species that dwelt in deeper waters, represented an abundant food source for populations willing to venture out to reach them. The psychological barrier may have been as significant as the technical challenges. To climb into a wooden vessel and deliberately sail away from the security of visible land required a profound act of trust in one's craft, one's skills, and one's companions. The sea had already claimed many lives by this point in human history. Everyone who lived near the coast knew someone who had been lost to storms or accidents. Choosing to venture further into that domain required courage that built upon itself with each successful voyage. As some returned safely from progressively longer journeys, others found the confidence to attempt their own explorations. By the middle of the 3rd millennium BCE, evidence indicates that regular open water routes were being sailed in several regions. The eastern Mediterranean saw increasing traffic between the Levantine coast and nearby islands. In the Persian Gulf, mariners connected Mesopotamian civilizations with trading partners along the Arabian coast. These journeys represented humanity's growing mastery over a realm that had once seemed utterly forbidding. The techniques, knowledge, and courage developed during this transitional period would lay the foundation for the remarkable maritime cultures that would soon emerge, transforming the Mediterranean Sea from a barrier into a highway of connection and commerce. The gentle waves of the Aegean Sea lap against the northern shores of Crete, where a civilization was quietly mastering the art of seafaring in ways that would transform the ancient Mediterranean world. While peoples along the great rivers had learned to navigate predictable currents and familiar banks, the Minoans were doing something remarkably different. They were building a culture that looked outward, across the blue expanse of open water, creating the first true maritime civilization. The island of Crete sits like a stepping stone in the Mediterranean, positioned between 3 continents. This geography was not merely coincidental to Minoan success, it was essential. The island's location meant that ambitious sailors could reach Egypt to the south, the Levantine coast to the east, and the Greek mainland to the north. But location alone does not create seafarers. The Minoans developed specific skills, specific vessels, and a specific relationship with the sea that distinguished them from their contemporaries. Archaeological evidence from the great palace complexes at Knossos, Phaistos, and Malea reveals a civilization deeply connected to maritime activity. The frescoes that decorated palace walls did not merely depict ships as occasional elements in the background. Instead, they celebrated vessels and sailing with prominence and detail that speaks to their central importance. One particularly beautiful fresco from Crete on the island of Thera shows an entire flotilla of ships, their hulls carefully rendered, their crews visible, their journey commemorated in vivid mineral pigments that have survived millennia. The ships themselves represented an evolution from earlier coastal craft. Minoan vessels needed to be more robust than riverboats, capable of handling the swells and unpredictable weather of open water. Evidence suggests they built ships with stronger frames and higher sides, offering better protection against waves that could swamp earlier, lower designs. The vessels appear to have used both sail and oars, a combination that gave captains flexibility in changing conditions. When winds were favorable, square sails made of linen could be raised on a single central mast. When winds failed or precise maneuvering was needed, crews could take to the oars. The size of Minoan ships varied according to purpose. Smaller fishing boats and coastal traders required only modest crews, perhaps 6 to 10 rowers. Larger vessels designed for longer voyages and heavier cargo might have accommodated 20 or more oarsmen, along with space for goods, provisions, and the occasional passenger. The careful balance between cargo capacity and crew needs was something Minoan shipbuilders apparently understood well. Too many rowers meant less space for profitable goods. Too few meant a vessel that could not maintain schedule or respond to emergencies. What exactly did these ships carry across the wine-dark waters? The archaeological record provides intriguing answers. Minoan pottery has been discovered in Egypt, the Levant, and throughout the Aegean Islands. This distinctive pottery, with its characteristic marine motifs of octopuses, dolphins, and nautilus shells, served as both cargo and container. Olive oil, wine, and other liquids were transported in large storage jars called pithoi, while finer goods traveled in smaller, more decorated vessels. The Minoans also traded in raw materials. They sought copper from Cyprus, tin from sources that remain debated among scholars, and luxury items from various Mediterranean shores. In return, Crete exported not only its own products, but also served as a hub where goods from different regions could be exchanged. This role as maritime middlemen brought prosperity to the island palaces. The wealth flowing from trade is evident in the elaborate architecture, the sophisticated art, and the complex administrative systems that developed. Clay tablets inscribed with linear A script, still not fully deciphered, appear to record inventories and transactions, suggesting organized commercial operations that tracked goods moving through Minoan ports. The ports themselves were carefully chosen and developed. Natural harbors along Crete's northern coast offered protection from prevailing winds. Some locations show evidence of simple improvements, basic breakwaters, or landing areas that made loading and unloading more efficient. These were not yet the elaborate harbour complexes that would develop in later centuries, but they represented a growing understanding that maritime commerce required infrastructure on land as well as capable vessels at sea. Navigating between islands and to distant shores demanded skills that went beyond simple boat handling. Minoan sailors developed practical knowledge of the Mediterranean's patterns. They learned which seasons brought reliable winds, which routes offered islands as waypoints for rest and shelter, and how to read the sky and sea for signs of approaching weather. This knowledge was surely passed from experienced sailors to younger crew members through observation and oral instruction, creating a maritime culture where expertise accumulated across generations. The cultural impact of this seafaring orientation permeated Minoan society. Unlike civilizations that built massive defensive walls, the Minoans appear to have relied partly on their naval capabilities for security. The great palaces of Crete were not heavily fortified in their earlier periods, suggesting a confidence that threats could be managed, or that the island's maritime connections provided sufficient warning and response capability. Whether this confidence was based on actual naval strength, diplomatic relationships maintained through trade, or simple geographical isolation remains a topic of scholarly discussion. Religious and ceremonial life also reflected the maritime environment. Ships appear in religious contexts on seals and frescoes, suggesting they held symbolic importance beyond mere transportation. The sea itself, with its bounty and its dangers, surely inspired reverence and ritual. The famous Minoan bull-leaping frescoes might seem unrelated to seafaring, but they speak to a culture comfortable with risk and skill, qualities essential to those who venture onto unpredictable waters. The reach of Minoan maritime influence extended to nearby islands and coastal areas. The settlement at Crete on Trireme, preserved beneath volcanic ash, reveals a community deeply connected to the Minoan world through artistic styles, architectural techniques, and maritime commerce. Other islands in the Cyclades show similar connections, creating a network of related communities linked by regular sea traffic. As the centuries passed, Minoan seafaring reached its height around 1700 years before the Common Era. Ships sailed confidently to distant shores, carrying goods and cultural influences that spread Minoan artistic styles throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Egyptian tomb paintings from this period depict visitors called the Keftiu, generally identified as Minoans, bringing distinctive gifts including elaborate vessels and other luxury goods. Yet this maritime civilization, for all its achievements, would not endure unchanged. The eruption of Trireme, around 1600 years before the Common Era, dealt a devastating blow to the interconnected island communities. Later, perhaps weakened by natural disaster, or simply overtaken by rising powers on the mainland, Minoan civilization gradually transformed. By 1450 years before the Common Era, the cultural center had shifted northward to Mycenaean Greece, where new seafarers would build upon the foundations the Minoans had established. But in their time, the Minoans had accomplished something remarkable. They had shown that the sea need not be merely crossed or cautiously navigated along coastlines. It could be embraced, mastered, and made central to an entire civilization's identity and prosperity. The lessons they learned, the ships they built, and the routes they pioneered would inform all Mediterranean seafaring that followed. As the Minoan civilization gradually faded from its position of maritime prominence, a new people emerged along the eastern shores of the Mediterranean who would transform seafaring in ways that still resonate through history. These were the Phoenicians, dwellers of a narrow coastal strip bordered by mountains on one side and the endless blue expanse on the other. Their homeland offered little agricultural abundance, but it provided something far more valuable: access to the sea and the cedar forests of Lebanon, whose tall, straight trees would become the bones of a maritime revolution. The Phoenician cities of Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos arose not as unified kingdoms, but as independent city-states, each governed by its own rulers, yet sharing a common culture, language, and profound understanding of the sea. Geography shaped their destiny, with mountains pressing close behind them and limited land for farming. These coastal communities looked outward to the waves, seeing in the Mediterranean's expanse not a barrier, but a highway, connecting distant shores and peoples hungry for trade. The vessels that emerged from Phoenician shipyards represented a remarkable evolution in maritime design. While earlier civilizations had built capable boats and ships, Phoenician shipwrights approached vessel construction with an engineering mindset that prioritized strength, stability, and the ability to survive the unpredictable moods of open water. They understood that the Mediterranean, for all its beauty on calm days, could transform into a treacherous realm of towering waves and contrary winds. The innovation that distinguished Phoenician ships above all others was their development and refinement of the keel. This central timber, running along the bottom of the vessel from bow to stern like a spine, provided structural integrity that earlier ships lacked. The keel allowed Phoenician builders to create longer, narrower hulls that cut through water more efficiently than the wider, rounder vessels of previous generations. This seemingly simple innovation transformed everything about how ships behaved at sea, providing stability that allowed vessels to maintain course even when winds and currents conspired to push them astray. Phoenician merchant ships, built broad and deep to maximize cargo capacity, featured sturdy construction techniques that bound timber to timber with remarkable precision. Their shipwrights shaped planks using adzes and other tools, fitting them edge to edge in a method that would later be called shell-first construction. Rather than building an internal frame and attaching planks to it, they created the hull shell first, building it up plank by plank from the keel outward, then adding internal supports for strength. This technique, combined with careful caulking using materials like resin and oakum, created hulls capable of withstanding the constant working of timbers as waves flexed and stressed the vessel. The vessels that carried Phoenician trade goods featured a single square sail suspended from a yard perpendicular to the mast. While this sail design had existed before, Phoenician sailors refined the rigging, developing better methods of raising, lowering, and adjusting the sail to catch available winds more effectively. They understood that the relationship between sail, wind, and hull required constant attention and adjustment. The merchant vessels could make reasonable progress with following winds, and though they could not sail directly into contrary winds, skilled crews learned to tack at angles, zigzagging their way toward destinations when direct routes proved impossible. At the waterline and below, Phoenician designers paid careful attention to hull shape. The underwater profile curved gracefully, allowing water to flow smoothly past rather than creating turbulence that would slow progress. The bow rose slightly, helping the vessel ride over waves rather than ploughing through them. These refinements, accumulated through generations of observation and experience, represented the kind of knowledge that could not be written in books, because there were no adequate words to describe the subtle relationships between shape, water, and movement. The cities themselves became centers, not just of shipbuilding, but of all the supporting crafts that maritime trade required. Rope makers twisted fibers into cordage strong enough to hold sail and mast against storm winds. Weavers created sailcloth from linen, producing fabric light enough to catch gentle breezes, yet sturdy enough to withstand the constant stress of wind pressure. Metalworkers forged anchors, the weights that allowed ships to remain stationary in harbors and protected coves, holding position against currents and tides. Potters created the large ceramic vessels called amphorae, whose pointed bottoms nested perfectly in ship holds, allowing maximum cargo while preventing rolling during transport. The harbors of Tyre and Sidon bustled with activity as vessels prepared for voyages that might last weeks or months. Crews loaded goods with practiced efficiency, understanding how proper weight distribution affected vessel handling. Heavy items settled low in the hold, lighter cargo stacked above, fresh water in sealed containers, dried foods, and other provisions filled spaces between trade goods. Each voyage represented considerable investment and risk, making careful preparation essential for success. Phoenician ships ventured farther than any regular trading voyages had previously traveled. They established contact with Cyprus, rich in copper. They traded with the Greek islands and mainland. Their vessels called at ports along the coast of what we now call Turkey, and made the journey to Egypt, where they exchanged Lebanese cedar and other goods for Egyptian products. Most remarkably, they pushed westward beyond the familiar Eastern Mediterranean, establishing trading posts and eventually permanent colonies along the North African coast, on Sicily, and on the islands between. The establishment of these distant outposts created a network spanning the Mediterranean world. A journey from Tyre to the western reaches might require weeks of sailing, with stops at intermediate ports for resupply and trade. Yet Phoenician sailors made these voyages regularly, accumulating detailed knowledge of coastlines, safe harbors, seasonal wind patterns, and the particular characteristics of different stretches of water. This knowledge, passed from experienced sailors to younger crew members through observation and oral instruction, represented a vast library of practical information about the sea. The ships themselves became emblems of Phoenician identity. Their curved prows often featured decorative elements, including painted eyes that seemed to watch the waters ahead. These vessels carried not just cargo, but the reputation of their home cities, their merchants, and their sailors. A Phoenician ship arriving in a distant port brought with it the expectation of quality goods, fair dealing, and the exotic mystique of traders who ventured across waters that local peoples might fear to traverse. As generations succeeded one another, Phoenician maritime expertise deepened and spread. Other peoples observed their methods, sometimes hiring Phoenician shipwrights and sailors, gradually adopting and adapting their innovations. Yet for several centuries, Phoenician vessels remained the most capable, and their sailors the most experienced on Mediterranean waters. They had transformed seafaring from occasional coastal ventures into regular long-distance voyages, proving that with proper vessels, accumulated knowledge, and courage, the sea could become not an obstacle but a connector of distant peoples and places. The Phoenician ships that ventured forth from Tyre and Sidon carried more than just cargo. They carried the promise of prosperity, the allure of distant lands, and goods so precious they would define the very identity of these remarkable seafarers. As these vessels caught the Mediterranean winds, their sails dyed in that distinctive purple hue. They wove together a commercial network more extensive than anything the ancient world had yet witnessed. The color itself became synonymous with Phoenician enterprise. Deep purple, rich as wine, extracted from thousands upon thousands of murex sea snails collected along the coastlines. The process was laborious, requiring patience and knowledge passed carefully through generations. Workers would gather the small shellfish, extract the tiny glands that produced the precious secretion, and then subject the material to precise treatments that would transform it into a dye of unparalleled quality. The resulting color resisted fading under sun and salt, maintaining its richness through countless seasons. This single commodity became so valuable that only the wealthiest individuals could afford garments dyed in Tyrian purple, and the very word Phoenician likely derives from the Greek word for purple red. But the trade routes these merchants established carried far more than purple-dyed textiles. Their ships transported cedar logs from the forests of Lebanon, timber so prized that Egyptian pharaohs and Mesopotamian kings had sought it for centuries. The wood was strong, aromatic, and resistant to decay, perfect for temples and palaces. Phoenician vessels also carried metalwork crafted in their cities, where artisans had mastered techniques for working bronze, silver, and gold. Glass vessels, another specialty, were carefully packed for the journey. The Phoenicians had refined glass-making methods that produced vessels of remarkable clarity and beauty, containers that would grace the tables of distant nobles. In the opposite direction came equally valuable goods. From Egypt, the Phoenicians acquired grain, papyrus, and linen. From Cyprus came copper, that essential element for bronze making. Silver flowed from Iberia, where Phoenician traders had established relationships with local peoples who mined the precious metal. Tin, necessary for bronze production and relatively rare in the Mediterranean, was sourced through complex trading chains that may have reached as far as the distant Atlantic coast. Ivory arrived from Africa, amber from northern lands, and everywhere the Phoenicians touched, local products entered their vast commercial web. The routes themselves became as familiar to Phoenician navigators as village paths to farmers. The journey from Tyre to Cyprus, sailing northeast with favorable winds, could be accomplished in days when conditions permitted. From Cyprus, routes branched like the limbs of a great tree. One path led southeast toward Egypt, following the coast where sailors could always find shelter if storms threatened. Another route extended westward, island hopping through the Aegean, where countless harbors offered respite and trading opportunities. The southern route hugged the African coast, where Phoenician merchants established relationships with local peoples. exchanging manufactured goods for raw materials and agricultural products. As their confidence grew, the Phoenicians pushed their sailing ranges ever outward. They founded Carthage on the North African coast, strategically positioned to serve as a waypoint for longer journeys westward. The city's protected harbors could accommodate many vessels, and warehouses stored goods awaiting transshipment. From Carthage, Phoenician ships continued to the western Mediterranean, establishing posts on Sicily, Sardinia, and the Balearic Islands. Each settlement served multiple purposes: trading post, repair station, and safe harbor for ships that might be caught by changing weather. The most ambitious routes extended beyond the Mediterranean entirely. Phoenician sailors navigated through the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, into the Atlantic Ocean. Along the Iberian coast, they established Gadir, known today as Cadiz, creating what may have been their westernmost permanent settlement. From these Atlantic coastal posts, they traded with peoples who had never seen Mediterranean goods, exchanging their crafts and purple textiles for the silver and tin that these regions offered in abundance. The techniques that enabled these extensive journeys combined careful observation with accumulated wisdom. Phoenician navigators learned to read the sea in ways that seem almost mystical to modern minds accustomed to electronic instruments. They noted how water changed color as depth varied, how certain wave patterns indicated approaching land or changing weather. They memorized the positions of stars and understood seasonal wind patterns. Trading routes were sailed during predictable weather windows, when prevailing winds offered favorable conditions for outbound journeys, and shifting seasonal patterns would aid the return voyage. These mariners also understood the importance of landmarks, distinctive mountains, unusual rock formations, particular islands. All became reference points in the mental maps that pilots carried. Written descriptions, though rare in archaeological evidence, may have existed as sailing directions, passed between captains and memorized by those learning the navigator's craft. More certainly, knowledge transferred through direct experience, as younger sailors learned by accompanying veterans on multiple voyages, gradually absorbing the countless subtle indicators that meant the difference between successful navigation and dangerous confusion. The ships themselves evolved to meet the demands of long-distance trade. Merchant vessels differed significantly from the sleeker designs used for warfare. These trading ships featured deeper, rounder hulls that sacrificed speed for cargo capacity. Their construction emphasized durability, as voyages might last weeks or months, exposing vessels to varying conditions. Storage areas in the hold were designed to accommodate diverse cargo types, from heavy timber to delicate glassware, from amphorae filled with oil or wine to bundles of dyed textiles. Crews developed sophisticated methods for loading and securing cargo, ensuring that goods would arrive in marketable condition despite the ship's constant motion. The economic impact of these trade networks rippled through the ancient world. Cities along Phoenician routes experienced increased prosperity, their markets enriched by exotic goods. Local artisans learned new techniques by examining Phoenician products. Cultural exchange accompanied commercial exchange, as ideas and practices spread along the same routes as merchandise. The Phoenician alphabet, that revolutionary writing system, traveled with merchants to trading partners, eventually evolving into Greek and Latin scripts that would shape Western civilization. As night settles over the ancient Mediterranean in our imagination, we might picture dozens of Phoenician vessels at various points along their routes. Some anchored safely in harbors, others sailing under starlight, their purple sails catching the gentle evening breeze, carrying the commerce that bound the ancient world together in an intricate dance of exchange and mutual benefit. The Phoenician merchants had established their routes, their purple-sailed ships, following well-worn paths across the Mediterranean. Yet these paths were not marked on any map, not drawn on any chart. The sea itself held no signposts, no markers to guide the way. How did these ancient mariners find their way across vast expanses of water, where one wave looked much like another, and the horizon stretched endlessly in all directions? The answer lies in a remarkable accumulation of knowledge, passed carefully from master to apprentice, from father to son, through countless generations of seafarers. The night sky became the ancient mariner's first and most reliable guide. Long before any civilization put stars into writing, sailors had learned to read the heavens. The stars moved in predictable patterns, wheeling overhead in their eternal dance, and certain stars held particular importance. In the northern hemisphere, navigators learned to locate the star we now call Polaris, though its position as the pole star was not quite as exact in ancient times due to the slow wobble of Earth's axis. Still, the general region of the northern sky provided a fixed point of reference, a celestial anchor that remained constant while all else turned around it. During twilight hours, when the horizon remained visible but stars began to emerge, skilled navigators could determine their heading with remarkable precision. They learned which constellations rose at which points along the horizon during different seasons. If a captain needed to sail west in autumn, he would know which stars would set before him as darkness fell. The path of the sun provided guidance during daylight hours, though reading its message required understanding how its arc across the sky changed with the seasons and with distance north or south. The Phoenicians developed an intimate knowledge of the constellation we call Ursa Minor, referring to it as a navigational aid when venturing beyond sight of land. Greek sailors learned similar lessons, building their own celestial vocabulary. These ancient astronomers understood that stars rose and set at different angles depending on latitude, and experienced navigators could estimate how far north or south they had traveled by observing the height of certain stars above the horizon. But the sky told only a part of the story. The sea itself spoke to those who learned its language. Experienced mariners could read the water's color and know what lay beneath. The deep blue of open ocean gave way to greener shades as water grew shallower. Muddy brown indicated river outflow, while certain color changes suggested underwater banks or reefs. Sailors approaching the Nile Delta could detect the freshwater influence miles before seeing land, tasting the change in salt content and observing the distinctive sediment that painted the sea in earthen tones. Wave patterns revealed secrets to the observant. Swells that traveled across open ocean maintained a consistent direction, formed by distant weather systems and prevailing winds. These rolling undulations could guide a captain even when fog obscured the sky, providing a physical reference for direction. Where currents met or where underwater features disrupted the flow, water surface patterns changed. Choppy, confused seas might indicate shallow water or dangerous rocks. Smooth patches could signal areas where opposing currents cancelled each other's turbulence. The wind itself became a compass of sorts. Mediterranean sailors learned the characteristic winds of their sea, the regular patterns that blew from certain directions during different seasons. Summer brought the Etesian winds from the north across the Aegean. Winter brought storms from the west. Local winds along coastlines exhibited daily patterns, with breezes flowing from sea to land during warm afternoons, then reversing after sunset as the land cooled. Sailors learned to anticipate these rhythms, to work with them rather than against them, and to read in their patterns information about location and season. Birds provided unexpected guidance to ancient navigators. Certain seabirds ranged far from land, but others remained coastal, never venturing beyond sight of shore. A sailor who spotted land-based birds knew that coastline lay within a day's journey, likely in the direction from which the birds had come in the morning, or toward which they flew at dusk. Migrating birds followed reliable routes between Africa and Europe, crossing the Mediterranean at specific points, and sailors learned these avian highways. The presence of certain fish, the appearance of floating vegetation, even the types of clouds that formed overhead. All these signs told stories to those who had learned to read them. Knowledge accumulated across lifetimes became the most precious cargo any ship carried. Young sailors apprenticed under experienced masters, learning not through written manuals, but through observation and oral instruction. They learned the sailing times between ports, the landmarks along coasts, the locations of safe harbors and treacherous shoals. They memorized descriptions of coastlines seen from the sea, the distinctive shape of a mountain, the pattern of a hillside, the location of a conspicuous temple or tower. This knowledge, refined and expanded over generations, became a maritime culture's greatest competitive advantage. The Phoenicians, sailing beyond the familiar Mediterranean, developed increasingly sophisticated observational skills. On their ventures along the Atlantic coast of Africa and Europe, they encountered unfamiliar stars, different wind patterns, strange tides that rose and fell far more dramatically than in their inland sea. Each voyage added to their collective knowledge, each returning captain contributing new observations to the shared understanding. This information was valuable enough that Phoenician navigators sometimes kept their most detailed knowledge secret, protecting trade advantages against competitors. Greek sailors similarly accumulated vast stores of maritime wisdom. The Periplus, a genre of ancient text that would eventually be written down, existed first as oral tradition. Detailed sailing directions passed from navigator to navigator. These descriptions included distances measured in days of sailing, landmarks, harbor locations, and information about peoples living along the coasts. The knowledge encoded in these traditions represented centuries of accumulated experience, purchased sometimes at the cost of ships lost, and lives spent learning the sea's harsh lessons. Mesopotamian sailors, venturing from the Persian Gulf along the Arabian coast and toward India, developed their own body of navigational knowledge suited to their waters. They learned to read the seasonal monsoon winds, to recognize the stars visible from tropical latitudes, to identify the different character of the Indian Ocean compared to the Mediterranean's more enclosed waters. This navigation without instruments was not guesswork or luck, but rather a sophisticated and systematic approach to wayfinding. It required years of training, keen observation, excellent memory, and deep understanding of natural patterns. Ancient navigators achieved remarkable feats using these techniques, crossing open water with confidence, finding tiny islands in vast seas, and returning safely to home ports after voyages spanning hundreds of miles. The accuracy of their methods is demonstrated by the success of their voyages, by the regular trade routes maintained across open water, by the colonies established in distant lands and successfully resupplied. While storms and miscalculations certainly claimed ships, the overall reliability of ancient navigation techniques was sufficient to sustain entire civilizations, dependent on maritime trade. As ships from different maritime cultures met at sea and in distant ports, navigational knowledge began to spread and merge, creating an increasingly sophisticated understanding of Mediterranean and adjacent waters. This shared wisdom would soon enable even more ambitious voyages and more complex naval operations. The stage was being set for the great age of Greek seafaring, where navigation skills would combine with advancing ship technology to carry Hellenic culture across vast reaches of the ancient world. The ancient Greeks developed their relationship with the sea gradually, generation by generation, until maritime life became woven into the very fabric of their civilization. Where the Phoenicians had mastered the waters through centuries of dedicated focus, the Greeks came to seafaring as one element of a broader culture, adapting and refining what others had pioneered, while adding their own distinctive contributions to the art of shipbuilding and navigation. Along the rocky coastlines and among the scattered islands of the Aegean, communities that had once relied primarily on agriculture found themselves increasingly drawn to the possibilities offered by the surrounding waters. The geography itself seemed to encourage this transformation. With mountains dividing the mainland into isolated valleys and hundreds of islands dotting the sea, water often provided easier paths for communication and trade than overland routes. A journey that might take days of difficult travel through mountainous terrain could be accomplished in hours by boat, provided the winds proved favorable and the seas remained calm. The Greeks inherited knowledge from the maritime peoples who had come before them. Minoan techniques, Phoenician innovations, and Egyptian traditions all flowed into Greek harbors, along with trade goods and travelers. Greek shipwrights observed foreign vessels that arrived at their shores, noting hull shapes, sail configurations, and construction methods. Yet they did not merely copy what they saw. Instead, they adapted these designs to suit their own needs, their own waters, and their own purposes. For the merchant trader, the Greeks developed vessels with broad, rounded hulls that could carry substantial cargo while remaining relatively stable in the sometimes temperamental Aegean waters. These merchant ships, which the Greeks called holkades, featured a length-to-width ratio of approximately 4:1, making them considerably wider in proportion than the sleeker vessels designed for speed. The rounded hull shape maximized interior cargo space, allowing merchants to transport amphorae filled with wine and olive oil, bundles of textiles, ceramic vessels, and all manner of goods between the scattered communities of the Greek world. The construction of these merchant vessels followed principles that balanced strength with practicality. Shipwrights began with a sturdy keel, that central timber running along the bottom of the vessel that provided the foundation for everything else. From this keel, they built upward, attaching ribs that curved outward to define the ship's shape, then planking the exterior with wooden strakes that overlapped slightly, each edge carefully fitted to create a reasonably watertight seal. The seams between planks received careful attention, with workers driving fibre mixed with pitch into the gaps to prevent water from seeping through. These merchant vessels typically carried a single square sail, mounted on a mast that stood roughly 1/3 of the way back from the bow. The sail itself was woven from linen, or in some cases from wool, creating a heavy fabric that could catch the wind effectively. Sailors could adjust the sail's angle using lines running to the deck, allowing them to make the most of whatever winds they encountered. When winds failed or blew from an unfavorable direction, merchant ships could rely on a small crew of rowers, though the heavy, cargo-laden vessels moved slowly under oar power alone. The steering of these ships occurred through large oars mounted on either side of the stern, operated by an experienced helmsman who understood the feel of his vessel, the way she responded to helm pressure, and the subtle adjustments needed to keep her on course. This steering method, inherited from earlier Mediterranean traditions, would persist in Greek ships for centuries, requiring considerable skill, but offering responsive control when properly handled. Fishing boats represented another category of Greek watercraft, generally smaller and more varied in design than the merchant vessels. These ranged from simple rowboats for inshore work to more substantial craft capable of venturing into deeper waters where larger fish could be found. Fishermen working from these vessels employed techniques passed down through generations, using nets woven from plant fibers, lines with bone or bronze hooks, and increasingly sophisticated knowledge of where different fish could be found during different seasons. The Greeks also developed specialized vessels for shorter journeys between nearby islands or along coastlines. These coastal craft didn't need the cargo capacity of long-distance merchants or the seaworthiness required for open water crossings. Instead, they prioritized ease of handling, allowing small crews or even individual operators to transport people, messages, and modest amounts of goods along well-traveled routes. Many of these smaller vessels could be beached easily, drawn up onto sandy shores when not in use, avoiding the need for elaborate harbor facilities. As Greek maritime activity expanded, certain cities emerged as centers of shipbuilding expertise. Athens, Corinth, and various island communities developed reputations for producing quality vessels, attracting craftsmen who specialized in different aspects of the shipwright's art. Some workers focused on selecting and preparing timber, understanding which woods provided the right combination of strength and workability for different parts of a ship. Others specialized in joinery, creating the complex connections that held a vessel together. Still others became expert in the finishing work, the waterproofing and rigging that transformed a wooden hull into a functional ship. The timber itself came from forests that once covered much of the Greek mainland and islands. Oak provided strength for structural elements like the keel and ribs. Pine, lighter and easier to work, served well for planking. As shipbuilding increased and forests nearest the coast became depleted, shipwrights and their suppliers had to venture farther inland or import timber from more distant regions, adding to the cost and complexity of construction. Greek sailors, like their Phoenician predecessors, accumulated detailed knowledge of the waters they traveled. They learned the locations of reliable harbors, where ships could shelter from storms. The positions of dangerous rocks and shoals that lurked beneath the surface, and the patterns of seasonal winds that could aid or hinder voyages. This knowledge passed from experienced sailors to younger crew members through years of shared voyaging, creating an oral tradition of maritime wisdom that proved as valuable as the ships themselves. The painted decorations on many Greek vessels added distinctive visual character to their maritime culture. Eyes painted on the bow supposedly helped the ship see its way across the waters, a custom borrowed from earlier Mediterranean traditions. Some vessels displayed symbols associated with particular cities or gods, while others featured geometric patterns or scenes of maritime life. These decorations served no practical purpose for sailing, but they transformed functional craft into expressions of cultural identity. Through centuries of gradual development and accumulated experience, the Greeks created a diverse fleet of vessels suited to the varied demands of Mediterranean seafaring. Their ships carried Greek colonists to new settlements around the Mediterranean and Black Sea coasts, transported goods that enriched their cities, and connected scattered communities into a broader cultural world. Yet even as Greek merchant ships and fishing boats plied the waters, a different type of vessel was emerging, one designed not for trade or harvest, but for conflict. The lessons learned building merchant hulls would soon be applied to an entirely different challenge, one that would reshape naval warfare and the balance of power across the ancient Mediterranean world. The Greek world, having mastered the peaceful arts of maritime commerce and the steady rhythms of merchant sailing, found itself drawn into a new challenge as city-states grew in power and ambition. The same waters that carried olive oil and wine could also carry warriors, and the need for vessels designed specifically for conflict gradually emerged along the shores of the Aegean Sea. The earliest Greek warships were not so different from merchant vessels, simply carrying soldiers who would attempt to board enemy craft. But as warfare became more sophisticated and naval encounters more common, shipwrights began to think differently about what a fighting vessel should be. Speed became paramount, as did the ability to maneuver quickly in the heat of action. These requirements led designers away from the broad, stable hulls that served merchants so well, and towards something altogether more specialized. The pentacontere, a galley with 50 oars arranged in a single row along each side, represented an important step in this evolution. These sleek vessels, appearing around the 8th century before the Common Era, could move swiftly through calm waters, powered by the coordinated efforts of their rowers. Yet as naval tactics developed, even 50 oars proved insufficient for the speeds and power that commanders desired. The solution that emerged was as elegant as it was challenging to execute. Rather than making ships longer, which would have made them unwieldy and structurally weak, Greek naval architects began experimenting with placing rowers at multiple levels. This innovation allowed them to pack more rowing power into a vessel of manageable length, creating something unprecedented in the ancient world. The bireme, with 2 levels of oars, appeared first, proving the concept could work. Rowers sat at different heights, their oars extending through the hull at carefully calculated angles to avoid interfering with one another. The coordination required was considerable, but the results justified the complexity. These vessels could achieve impressive speeds and possessed the power to ram enemy ships, a tactic that would define Mediterranean naval warfare for centuries. Yet the drive for greater power and speed continued, and sometime around the 6th century before the Common Era, likely in the shipyards of Corinth or possibly Phoenicia, the trireme emerged. This vessel represented the pinnacle of ancient galley design, incorporating 3 distinct levels of rowers arranged in a configuration that maximized power while maintaining structural integrity. The trireme's design was a masterwork of engineering precision. The vessel measured approximately 120 feet in length, but only 18 feet at its widest point, creating a length-to-width ratio that would have been dangerously unstable in a sailing vessel. The narrow hull cut through water with minimal resistance, while the 3 banks of oars provided enormous propulsive force. The arrangement of the rowers required careful thought and precise construction. The lowest bank, called the Triremians, sat inside the hull near the waterline, their oars emerging through leather-sealed ports that prevented water from entering. Above them, positioned carefully to avoid the lower oars, sat the Zygians, while the topmost rowers, the Thranites, sat on an outrigger structure that extended slightly beyond the hull's main width. This outrigger allowed the Thranites sufficient leverage for effective rowing while keeping the hull itself narrow. Each position presented different challenges and required different skills. The Thranites, highest above the water, had the longest oars and the most comfortable seat, with fresh air and a clear view. The Triremians, working in the dim interior of the hull with shorter oars, needed steady nerves and the ability to maintain rhythm without external reference points. The coordination of all 170 rowers demanded not just individual skill, but a collective discipline that Greek city-states, with their tradition of citizen participation, proved remarkably capable of achieving. The trireme's effectiveness came not from armor or heavy construction, but from speed and maneuverability. The hull was built as lightly as possible, using techniques that prioritized flexibility and reduced weight. Planks were carefully fitted edge to edge, creating a shell that was then reinforced with internal frames. The vessel possessed a bronze-sheathed ram at the waterline, designed to punch through enemy hulls. But its real weapon was the ability to position this ram precisely where commanders wanted it. Training a trireme crew represented a significant investment. Rowers needed to develop the timing and endurance for sustained effort, maintaining synchronized strokes through extended engagements. Commands were relayed by a pipe player whose music set the rowing rhythm, while officers called specific maneuvers. The ability to execute sharp turns, sudden accelerations, and the delicate approach required for an effective ramming attack distinguished elite crews from ordinary ones. The Trireme carried a small complement of marines and archers, perhaps 10 to 14 fighters, but these were almost incidental to the vessel's primary function. Unlike earlier warships where soldiers were the main offensive force, the trireme itself was the weapon. The skill of its crew in handling the vessel determined the outcome of engagements more than individual combat prowess. Maintaining these sophisticated vessels required constant attention. The lightweight construction that made them fast also made them vulnerable to the destructive effects of water. Triremes needed to be hauled ashore regularly to dry, preventing the wood from becoming waterlogged and maintaining optimal performance. This requirement shaped naval operations, as fleets needed access to beaches where vessels could be drawn up each night. The expense of building and operating triremes was considerable. Athens, which became the greatest naval power of the classical Greek world, developed a system where wealthy citizens financed individual vessels as a public duty. These sponsors, called triremes, were responsible for maintaining the ship and paying the crew, representing a significant financial burden that nonetheless conveyed substantial prestige. By the 5th century before the Common Era, the trireme had become the standard warship of the Greek world and the wider Mediterranean. The vessel's dominance would last for generations, proving itself in countless engagements and fundamentally altering the balance of power among ancient civilizations. The Greeks had created something that combined engineering sophistication with tactical flexibility, a vessel that extended their reach across the wine-dark sea and made naval power a decisive factor in the ancient world. As these sleek warships multiplied in harbors around the Aegean, they required ever more elaborate facilities for construction, maintenance, and storage, transforming the ports where they gathered into complex installations devoted to maritime power. As ships grew larger and more numerous across the ancient Mediterranean, the shorelines themselves had to evolve. The simple beaches where fishermen had once dragged their small boats ashore could no longer accommodate the bustling maritime commerce that connected distant civilizations. The natural bays and inlets that had served earlier generations now required human intervention to transform them into proper harbors, capable of sheltering fleets and facilitating the exchange of goods from across the known world. The earliest ports were modest affairs, little more than protected anchorages where ships could shelter from storms and crews could wade ashore. But as trade expanded and vessels grew in size and value, coastal cities began to invest tremendous resources in creating dedicated harbor facilities. The development of these ports represents one of the ancient world's most impressive engineering achievements, though they remain less celebrated than temples or pyramids. The basic challenge facing ancient harbor builders was protecting ships from the sea's endless motion. Waves, winds, and currents that served sailors so well in open water became enemies once a vessel reached its destination. A ship tossing against a rocky shore or colliding with other vessels could be damaged or destroyed, cargo and all. The solution was to create areas of calm water where the sea's energy could be absorbed or deflected before reaching the moored ships. Breakwaters became the essential feature of ancient port construction. These massive barriers, built from enormous stone blocks, extended from the shore into the sea, creating protected basins where ships could anchor safely. The construction of breakwaters required moving and placing stones of incredible weight, often in deep water, where workers had to operate from boats or diving platforms. Some ancient harbors used wooden frames filled with rubble, while others employed natural features like offshore islands or rocky promontories as starting points for their artificial barriers. The harbor at Piraeus, serving Athens, exemplifies the sophistication of Greek port engineering. Rather than a single harbor, Piraeus contained multiple specialized basins, each designed for specific purposes. The commercial harbors handled merchant vessels and their cargoes, with long quays where ships could tie up and wide areas for storing goods. The military harbor, known as Zia, provided secure facilities for the Athenian navy's triremes, with ship sheds where these valuable warships could be drawn ashore and protected from the elements when not in use. These ship sheds discovered through archaeological excavations, were themselves engineering marvels. Long, narrow buildings open to the water. They featured sloped floors and wooden rails that allowed crews to haul triremes out of the water using ropes and human muscle power. Hundreds of such sheds lined the shores of Athens' military harbours, each precisely constructed to accommodate a single trireme. The systematic organisation of these facilities reveals the bureaucratic sophistication required to maintain a large fleet, with each shed numbered and assigned to a specific ship and crew. Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great in Egypt, developed what became the ancient world's most famous harbour complex. The city's position on the Mediterranean coast, with Lake Mareotis behind it, provided natural advantages that engineers enhanced through ambitious construction projects. The most celebrated feature was the Pharos Lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, which guided ships to the harbour entrance with its beacon fire visible from many miles at sea. But beyond this famous monument, Alexandria's harbour facilities included extensive artificial moles, creating protected anchorages, warehouses of enormous capacity, and administrative buildings where officials managed the paperwork that accompanied maritime commerce. The daily operations of ancient ports required an entire ecosystem of specialized workers and facilities. As ships arrived, harbour officials would inspect cargoes and collect duties or taxes on imported goods. These customs procedures, tedious as they might seem, were essential to government revenues in maritime civilizations. Scribes maintained careful records, creating paper trails that archaeologists have sometimes recovered, giving us glimpses into the actual functioning of ancient trade networks. Longshoremen, the workers who loaded and unloaded ships, developed their own techniques and tools for moving cargo efficiently. Heavy items required wooden cranes and pulley systems, technology that Greeks and Romans perfected through practical experience in their harbours. Lighter goods might be carried by human porters, often organised into teams or guilds that controlled access to this essential work. The waterfront districts of ancient ports were places of constant motion and noise, with goods flowing between ships and warehouses, merchants negotiating deals, and sailors seeking provisions before their next voyage. Warehousing represented a critical function in port cities. Many goods arriving by sea were not immediately distributed to final customers, but required storage, sometimes for extended periods. Grain shipments especially needed proper facilities to prevent spoilage. Roman engineers developed multi-story warehouses with ventilation systems and raised floors that protected stored grain from moisture and vermin. These horaea, as they were called, could hold vast quantities of provisions, creating strategic reserves that cities could draw upon during shortages. Shipyards formed another essential component of port infrastructure. Major harbour cities maintained facilities for building new vessels and repairing damaged ones. These required not just open space, but also access to timber supplies, rope-making workshops for producing the vast amounts of cordage that ships needed, and sailmakers who crafted the canvas that caught the wind. The concentration of maritime expertise in port cities created specialized knowledge that passed from master craftsmen to apprentices across generations. Beyond the physical infrastructure, ports required social organization and legal frameworks to function smoothly. Ancient maritime civilizations developed elaborate codes governing ship arrivals, harbor fees, liability for damaged cargo, and resolution of disputes between merchants from different cities or cultures. These practical regulations, born from the necessity of facilitating trade, contributed to the development of international law and commerce conventions that still influence modern practice. Some ports developed specialized facilities, reflecting their particular roles in maritime networks. Carthage, with its circular military harbor, created a unique design where warships could be maintained in a protected basin, with a central island containing administrative buildings and naval arsenals. The entrance to this inner harbor could be chained off, preventing enemy ships from penetrating to the vulnerable fleet within. This design reflected Carthage's position as a major naval power, requiring maximum security for its maritime military assets. As evening fell over ancient harbors, the pace of activity would gradually slow. Ships that had arrived during the day would secure their moorings for the night. Harbor lights, smaller cousins of great lighthouses, would be lit to mark hazards and guide any vessels approaching in darkness. Warehouses would be sealed and guards posted. Yet even at night, ports never truly slept. Tides and winds did not observe human schedules, and ships might arrive or depart at any hour when conditions favored their movements. The transformation of simple anchorages into sophisticated harbor complexes represented a crucial step in humanity's mastery of seafaring. These facilities enabled the regular, reliable maritime commerce that connected ancient civilizations and allowed specialization and cultural exchange on a scale impossible in earlier eras. As we drift towards sleep, we might imagine the gentle lapping of waves against ancient quays, the creaking of moored ships, and the patient stones of breakwaters standing against the eternal sea. The shores of North Africa witnessed the rise of a maritime power that would dominate the Western Mediterranean for centuries. Carthage, established by Phoenician settlers from Tyre around 814 BCE, according to ancient tradition, inherited and perfected the seafaring knowledge of its mother city. What began as a trading outpost on the Tunisian coast evolved into a civilization whose very existence depended upon mastery of the sea. The Carthaginians understood that ships were the arteries through which their empire's lifeblood flowed. Their vessels carried Spanish silver, African ivory, Sardinian grain, and countless other goods that enriched their markets and treasury. Unlike civilizations that could expand overland, Carthage looked outward to the waves, building an identity inseparably linked to the rhythm of tides and the filling of sails. The shipyards of Carthage hummed with constant activity, producing vessels that combined traditional Phoenician design principles with innovations born from centuries of Mediterranean experience. Their merchant ships featured deep, rounded hulls, capable of carrying substantial cargo while maintaining seaworthiness in challenging conditions. Craftsmen shaped sturdy keels from mature timber, understanding that this central spine would bear the stresses of both cargo weight and wave action. The planking technique they employed created strong, watertight hulls that could endure long voyages down the African coast or westward through the Pillars of Hercules into the Atlantic's mysterious waters. The war fleet of Carthage represented perhaps their most remarkable maritime achievement. Their shipwrights constructed King Triremes, powerful vessels larger and more formidable than the Greek triremes that had once dominated naval warfare. These ships featured 5 rows of oars arranged in a complex configuration that multiplied human power into devastating ramming force. The exact arrangement of rowers remains a subject of scholarly discussion, but ancient sources describe vessels requiring around 300 men to propel them through the water with coordinated precision. At the heart of Carthage's naval infrastructure stood the military harbour, an engineering marvel that protected the fleet while projecting power. The harbour consisted of two connected basins, with the outer rectangular harbour serving commercial vessels, while the inner circular basin housed the war fleet. This circular naval harbour, known as the Kothon, measured roughly 1,000 feet in diameter and featured a central island housing administrative buildings from which harbour masters could oversee the entire facility. Around the harbour's perimeter, covered ship sheds protected individual vessels from weather and deterioration, keeping them ready for rapid deployment. These ship sheds numbered over 200, each one precisely constructed to shelter a single warship. The covered structures preserved vessels from sun damage and wood rot, extending their operational lifespan considerably. Archaeological investigations of the harbour area have revealed remnants of these slipways, showing how Carthaginian engineers calculated angles and dimensions to facilitate launching while providing secure storage. The systematic organization of this naval facility reflected a sophisticated understanding of fleet logistics and maintenance that few ancient civilizations could match. The entrance to the naval harbour could be closed with chains, securing the fleet from both weather and potential attack. This security allowed Carthage to maintain a ready reserve of naval power, while projecting an image of strength to potential rivals. Ancient writers described how the harbour's design concealed the true size of the Carthaginian fleet from observers outside, maintaining strategic ambiguity about their naval capabilities. Manning these vessels required drawing upon Carthage's diverse population and allied peoples. Unlike Athens, where citizens proudly served as rowers, Carthage often employed professional sailors and recruited oarsmen from their subject peoples and allies. This system reflected the Carthaginian approach to power, which relied upon wealth to secure services rather than civic obligation. Naval commanders came from Carthage's elite families, individuals trained from youth in maritime affairs and the prosecution of naval campaigns. The Carthaginian merchant fleet operated according to well-established routes and seasonal patterns. Their captains knew the optimal times for voyaging to different destinations, understanding how wind patterns shifted through the year. Vessels departed for Spain in spring, taking advantage of favorable conditions for the westward journey to mining regions where precious metals awaited transport. Other ships ventured southward along the African coast, establishing trading relationships with peoples beyond the Mediterranean world and returning with exotic goods that commanded premium prices in eastern markets. Navigation techniques employed by Carthaginian sailors built upon the accumulated wisdom of Phoenician ancestors. They observed celestial bodies, noting the positions of particular stars and the sun's path across the sky. Coastal landmarks received careful attention, with pilots memorizing distinctive features that marked safe approaches to harbors or warned of dangerous shoals. Some ancient sources suggest Carthaginian navigators possessed written records of routes and coastal features, though none of these precious documents survive for modern examination. The maritime commerce that sustained Carthage created networks of relationships spanning the known world. Their merchants maintained contacts with peoples along the Atlantic coast of Africa, exchanging Mediterranean manufactured goods for raw materials and exotic products. Westward voyages reached the tin-producing regions of the Iberian Peninsula and possibly extended to Britain. though the Carthaginians guarded these trade routes jealously, spreading tales of monsters and impossible conditions to discourage competitors from following their profitable paths. Shipboard life for Carthaginian sailors involved both routine and hardship. Crews departed with stores of dried fish, grain, wine, and water sufficient for extended voyages, though finding opportunities to replenish supplies at friendly ports along the way eased longer journeys. Sleep came on deck under the stars or in cramped conditions below, with sailors wrapping themselves in cloaks against cool night air. The constant motion of the vessel, the creaking of timbers, and the splash of waves created a soundscape that became second nature to those who spent their lives upon the water. The Carthaginian maritime empire reached its zenith during the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE, when their fleets controlled key islands, including western Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, and the Balearics. This network of bases allowed them to dominate trade routes and project power across vast stretches of sea. Their navy protected merchant vessels from pirates, while also enforcing Carthaginian interests, intercepting ships that ventured into waters they considered their own domain. As evening settles over the ancient harbour, we might imagine the scene as crews secured vessels for the night. The splash of water against stone quays mixed with voices calling final instructions. Torches flickered to life along the harbour's edge, reflecting off dark water where ships rocked gently at their moorings. The smell of pitch and timber mingled with salt air, while the mechanisms of maritime commerce gradually quieted as darkness deepened. Tomorrow would bring renewed activity, but for now, the great naval power rested, its wooden vessels safely sheltered in their ingenious circular harbour, awaiting whatever challenges the next dawn might reveal across the western Mediterranean's contested waters. The transformation of Rome from a land power into a naval force represents one of history's most remarkable maritime achievements. When we consider that the Roman Republic spent its early centuries focused almost entirely on land-based military might and territorial expansion across the Italian peninsula, their eventual mastery of the waves becomes all the more impressive. The Romans were farmers and soldiers, engineers of roads and aqueducts, but they were not, by tradition or inclination, sailors. The catalyst for Rome's naval awakening came through necessity rather than natural affinity. As Roman influence expanded, they found themselves facing Carthage, that formidable maritime power whose fleets commanded the western Mediterranean with skill accumulated over centuries. The first war between these powers would force Rome to confront an uncomfortable truth. Land victories meant little when an enemy controlled the seas. And so, with characteristic Roman determination, they set about learning an entirely new form of warfare. The year was 264 BCE when Rome committed to building a navy. According to historical accounts, they possessed almost no ships capable of naval combat. The story passed down through ancient historians tells of a Carthaginian warship that ran aground on the Italian coast, providing the Romans with an unexpected template. Roman shipwrights examined this vessel with the methodical attention that characterized their approach to all engineering challenges. They measured its dimensions, studied its construction, analyzed how the planks were joined, and how the hull was shaped. Within a remarkably short time, they had not only replicated the design but had constructed an entire fleet. Whether this account captures the full complexity of Rome's naval development or simplifies a more gradual process, it reflects a fundamental truth about Roman character: their ability to observe, adapt, and systematize. They approached shipbuilding with the same practical engineering mindset they brought to constructing bridges and siege engines. Roman shipyards along the Italian coast became centers of intense activity, with timber being shaped and fitted according to newly learned patterns. The sound of hammers and saws filled the air as vessels took shape with increasing speed and efficiency. Yet building ships was only the beginning. The Romans faced an even greater challenge. They had virtually no trained sailors or naval commanders. Carthaginian crews had grown up with the sea, learning navigation and seamanship from childhood, in a culture where maritime expertise passed from generation to generation. Roman citizens, by contrast, were more comfortable with a plow or a sword than with ropes and sails. They needed to find a way to overcome this disadvantage, to somehow compensate for centuries of accumulated Carthaginian naval experience. The Roman solution demonstrated their genius for practical innovation. They developed a device called the corvus, a Latin word meaning crow or raven. This was a boarding bridge, approximately 36 feet in length, mounted on the bow of their warships. A heavy spike protruded from the underside of the bridge's far end. When a Roman ship approached an enemy vessel, the corvus would be raised upright on its pivot, then drop down onto the enemy deck. The spike would embed itself in the wooden planks, effectively locking the two ships together. This invention transformed naval warfare into something Romans understood: close combat. Once the corvus connected two vessels, Roman soldiers could cross the bridge and engage in the hand-to-hand fighting at which they excelled. The device essentially converted sea battles into land battles fought on wooden platforms. It negated much of the advantage that skilled Carthaginian sailors possessed in ship handling and maneuvering. No longer did victory depend primarily on ramming techniques or superior seamanship. Now, Roman legionaries could bring their disciplined fighting formations and combat training to bear in naval engagements. The effectiveness of this innovation became apparent in several significant battles. The Battle of Mylae in 260 BCE saw Rome achieve its first major naval victory, with the corvus playing a crucial role. Ships equipped with these boarding bridges managed to capture or destroy numerous Carthaginian vessels. The psychological impact was considerable, as Carthage suddenly found its long-held naval superiority challenged by these determined newcomers to maritime warfare. Rome's approach to building and maintaining naval forces reflected their talent for organization and logistics. They established systematic training programs for rowers and sailors, many of whom were drawn from Rome's allies in the Italian coastal regions, where maritime traditions were stronger. They created administrative structures for managing fleets, ensuring supplies of timber, rope, sailcloth, and other essential materials. Naval construction became standardized, allowing for rapid replacement of vessels when storms or battle caused losses. The Romans also learned from their mistakes, and the sea provided harsh lessons. A massive fleet was destroyed by storms off the coast of Sicily in 255 BCE, with the loss of perhaps hundreds of ships and tens of thousands of men. Rather than abandoning their naval ambitions, the Romans rebuilt, modifying designs to improve seaworthiness. when another storm decimated a fleet in 253 BCE, they rebuilt again. This persistence in the face of maritime disasters demonstrated a commitment that eventually outlasted Carthaginian resolve. Roman shipyards refined their construction techniques through practice and experience. They adopted the best elements of Greek and Carthaginian designs, while adding their own improvements. Their warships, particularly the King Kerem type with its 5 levels of oar power, became formidable vessels combining speed, strength, and fighting capacity. The Romans proved exceptionally efficient at mass production, able to construct large numbers of ships in relatively short periods when strategic needs demanded. The integration of naval power into Rome's military system required developing entirely new command structures and strategic thinking. Roman generals, trained in land warfare, had to learn naval tactics and the complexities of maritime logistics. They had to understand wind patterns, seasonal sailing conditions, and the challenges of maintaining fleets far from home ports. Supply ships became as important as warships, carrying grain, water, weapons, and replacement equipment to naval squadrons operating across the Mediterranean. By the end of the conflicts with Carthage, Rome had transformed itself into a genuine naval power. Their fleets patrolled waters that had once belonged exclusively to others. Roman shipwrights had absorbed centuries of Mediterranean maritime knowledge and added their own innovations. The corvus eventually fell out of favor as Roman sailors gained genuine seafaring expertise, no longer needing such devices to compensate for inexperience. They had become true mariners in their own right. The creation of Rome's navy demonstrated that maritime mastery could be learned, systematized, and achieved through determination and practical engineering. Within a few generations, Romans who had barely known the sea had created the naval infrastructure that would eventually control every coastline of the Mediterranean world, ready now to establish the maritime supremacy that we will explore ahead. The transformation of Rome from a land power into the master of Mediterranean waters represents one of the most remarkable shifts in ancient history. As the Roman Republic expanded its territories through the Italian peninsula and beyond, it became increasingly clear that true dominance would require control not just of the coastlines, but of the vast sea that connected them all. Following their hard-won victories and the development of effective naval capabilities, the Romans approached maritime supremacy with the same methodical organization they applied to their legions on land. The Mediterranean, which the Romans would come to call Mare Nostrum, meaning our sea, gradually became a Roman lake, though this control required constant vigilance and careful planning. The Romans established permanent naval bases at strategic locations throughout the Mediterranean. These installations, known as classis bases, were positioned to allow rapid response to threats and to maintain regular patrols along vital sea routes. The most important of these bases included Misenum on the Bay of Naples, which served as headquarters for the Tyrrhenian Fleet, and Ravenna on the Adriatic coast, home to the fleet that patrolled eastern waters. Additional stations were established at Alexandria in Egypt, Forum Julii in southern Gaul, and various points along the African coast. Each base maintained a substantial complement of vessels in various states of readiness. Some ships were kept fully manned and provisioned, ready to sail at short notice, while others underwent maintenance or repair in covered ship sheds that protected the wooden hulls from the damaging effects of prolonged exposure to sun and water. The systematic rotation of vessels between active patrol, maintenance, and reserve status ensured that Roman naval power remained consistently available throughout the year. The organization of these fleets followed military principles refined over centuries of Roman governance. Each squadron operated under clear chains of command, with experienced officers who understood both naval tactics and administrative logistics. The sailors themselves, known as nautae, came from diverse backgrounds, including citizens from coastal regions, freedmen, and allies from maritime traditions. Over time, naval service became a respected career, offering steady pay, the possibility of Roman citizenship upon retirement, and the pride of serving in forces that protected the empire's prosperity. Roman naval tactics in this period of dominance focused less on the dramatic fleet battles of earlier conquest and more on the sustained presence that prevented challenges from arising. Regular patrols along established routes created a visible demonstration of Roman power, discouraging potential threats before they could materialize. Ships traveled in squadrons, their disciplined formations and well-maintained appearance sending clear messages about Roman capability and determination. The protection of grain shipments became one of the Navy's most critical peacetime responsibilities. Rome's massive population depended on steady imports of wheat from Egypt, North Africa, and Sicily. These cargo vessels, heavy and relatively slow-moving, were vulnerable to both storms and human threats. Roman naval vessels escorted grain convoys during their voyages, particularly through waters where risks were elevated. The presence of warships transformed these merchant voyages into exercises in maritime security, ensuring that the bread that fed Rome's citizens arrived reliably at Italian ports. The Romans developed sophisticated systems for maritime communication and coordination. Signal stations positioned on coastal heights could relay messages along the shoreline using flags during daylight and fire beacons at night. These networks allowed information about ship movements, weather conditions, or potential dangers to travel faster than any vessel could sail. A sighting in the eastern Mediterranean could be communicated to naval headquarters within days, allowing commanders to deploy resources efficiently across vast distances. Beyond military vessels, the Roman Navy maintained specialized craft for various administrative purposes. Swift Liburnian galleys carried official dispatches and important passengers, their speed making them ideal for communication between distant provinces. Survey vessels charted coastlines and harbors, updating navigational knowledge as conditions changed. Even lighthouse maintenance required maritime support, with supply vessels regularly visiting these isolated stations with provisions and fuel for the warning fires that guided nighttime navigation. The economic impact of Roman naval supremacy extended throughout the empire, with piracy suppressed and sea lanes secure. Maritime trade flourished to unprecedented levels. Merchants could plan voyages with confidence, knowing that Roman protection made their ventures far less risky than in previous centuries. Insurance costs decreased, encouraging investment in larger ships and more ambitious trading ventures. The relatively safe seas allowed for specialized cargo vessels that prioritized capacity over defensive capability, further improving the economics of maritime commerce. This security enabled cultural exchange on a scale previously unimaginable. Scholars could travel safely between the great centers of learning at Athens, Alexandria, and Rome. Artists and craftspeople found markets for their work across multiple continents. Religious ideas, philosophical concepts, and technological innovations spread along sea routes protected by Roman naval power. The Mediterranean became not merely a transportation route, but a highway for the exchange of ideas that would shape Western civilization. The Romans also understood that maritime supremacy required control of strategic coastal positions. Islands like Sicily, Sardinia, and Crete were valued not only for their resources, but for their locations along major sea routes. Fortified positions on these islands provided bases for patrols and refuges for vessels caught in storms. The integration of these territories into the Roman administrative system ensured coordinated maritime security throughout the basin. Harbor facilities received continuous investment and improvement under Roman administration. The great ports at Ostia, Puteoli, and Carthage were expanded with additional berths, warehouses, and loading facilities. Roman engineering expertise created artificial harbors when natural formations were inadequate, using concrete that could set underwater to build breakwaters and quays that withstood the Mediterranean's sometimes violent weather. These improvements facilitated faster cargo handling, reducing the time ships spent in port, and increasing the efficiency of maritime commerce. As night settles over these ancient waters, we can imagine the countless vessels moving through darkness across Roman seas, their courses confident, because generations of development had transformed the Mediterranean from a barrier into a highway, the lighthouse beacons marking safe harbors, the patrol ships maintaining their vigilant routes, and the cargo vessels, heavy with goods moving between distant provinces, all represented the culmination of Rome's naval achievement. This maritime supremacy, maintained through organization, infrastructure, and the lessons learned from earlier seafaring peoples, created an interconnected world that stretched from the Atlantic shores to the eastern reaches of the Mediterranean. Having established dominance over the Mediterranean's great trade routes and secured the waterways for commerce and military movement, the ancient civilizations that mastered the seas relied upon countless smaller vessels and everyday maritime activities that formed the true fabric of coastal life. While the grand warships and massive cargo vessels captured the imagination and commanded attention in historical records, it was the humble boats of daily existence that truly bound these societies to the water and shaped the rhythms of ordinary life along every shore. The fishermen who ventured out each morning before dawn formed the most ancient and continuous maritime tradition of all. Their small boats, often no more than 15 feet in length, carried on techniques and designs that stretched back thousands of years to humanity's earliest relationship with water. Along the Mediterranean coast, these fishing craft varied by region and local conditions, yet they shared common features born of practical necessity. Most were open boats without decks, allowing fishermen to work their nets and lines with ease, while curved hulls provided stability in choppy waters near shore. The wood used in construction came from whatever trees grew locally: cedar in the Levant, oak in Greek territories, pine in Italy, and each boat bore the distinctive character of its builder's hand. These fishermen knew the waters with an intimacy that surpassed even the most skilled navigators of trading vessels. They understood which rocky outcrops sheltered, which species of fish, how the moon's phases influence the movement of schools beneath the surface, and where currents converge to create abundant feeding grounds. This knowledge passed from father to son, from master to apprentice, creating generations of maritime expertise that formed invisible maps more detailed than any chart drawn on papyrus or parchment. The methods of catching fish had evolved into diverse techniques suited to different prey and conditions. Some fishermen worked with hooks and lines, fashioning their implements from bronze or bone, baiting them with smaller fish or shellfish. Others cast circular nets that spread across the water's surface before sinking to trap unwary fish beneath. The most ambitious fishing operations employed large nets, worked by multiple boats, requiring coordination and timing that transformed fishing into a communal activity, bringing together several families or vessels in cooperative effort. Along rivers and at narrow strait crossings, ferry operators provided essential transportation services that connected communities separated by water. These ferries ranged from simple rafts poled across gentle currents to more substantial boats capable of carrying passengers, livestock, and cargo across wider channels. The Nile had countless ferry crossings, some operated by temples or government authorities, others run by families who had maintained the same route for generations. At the Hellespont, ferries moved steadily back and forth between Europe and Asia, carrying merchants, travelers, and news between continents, while charging modest fees that provided steady income to their operators. The ferrymaster occupied a unique position in ancient society, neither wealthy nor impoverished, serving as a constant presence who witnessed the flow of human activity across the water. These operators knew their passengers, recognized regular travelers, and heard news from both shores. A ferry crossing became a liminal space where journeys began or ended, where conversations with strangers occurred naturally, and where the isolation of separate communities dissolved in the shared experience of water passage. In the larger cities, harbor areas bustled with specialized service vessels that kept commercial operations flowing smoothly. Small boats called lighters worked constantly, transferring cargo between large merchant ships anchored in deeper water and the dock facilities along shore. These vessels darted among the bigger ships like busy insects, their crews expert at maneuvering in tight spaces, calculating loads, and making countless trips throughout each day. Other service boats carried fresh water out to ships, removed waste, delivered messages between vessels, and transported harbor officials conducting inspections or collecting customs duties. The wealthier citizens of maritime cities sometimes maintained pleasure boats for recreation and entertainment. These vessels represented one of the few purely leisure uses of watercraft in the ancient world, where nearly every boat served practical purposes of commerce, defense, or sustenance. Roman aristocrats might commission elegant boats for excursions along the Bay of Naples, fitted with comfortable seating, and sometimes even small dining areas, where guests could enjoy meals while drifting on gentle waters. Greek symposiasts occasionally extended their gatherings onto boats moored in harbors, finding the rocking motion and sea breezes a pleasant accompaniment to philosophical discussion and wine. Communication networks along coastlines depended on small, fast boats that carried messages between communities, before roads connected all settlements, and when land travel meant difficult journeys over mountains or through dense forests. Coastal shipping often provided the quickest and most reliable means of sending information. These message boats, crewed by strong rowers, could make remarkable time when conditions favored them, linking trading posts, military outposts, and administrative centers in chains of communication that held empires together. Religious observances frequently incorporated maritime elements in coastal communities, where the sea influenced every aspect of life. Small boats might carry offerings to specific locations deemed sacred, particular rocks jutting from the water, or caves accessible only from the sea. Festivals honoring maritime deities involved processions of decorated boats, while fishing communities performed ceremonies seeking favorable conditions and safe returns. The boats used in these religious activities often received special decoration and care, maintained separately from working vessels, and brought out only for sacred purposes. The boat builders who constructed these diverse vessels for daily life worked in yards along every stretch of inhabited coastline. Unlike the specialized shipyards that produced warships or large cargo vessels, these artisans often worked alone or with one or two apprentices, creating boats commissioned by individual fishermen or small business operators. Their craft combined traditional knowledge with personal innovation, as each builder developed preferences for particular techniques or distinctive touches that marked their work. The smell of fresh wood shavings, the sound of mallets driving wooden pegs, and the sight of new hulls taking shape became familiar presences in coastal neighborhoods. Children growing up in maritime communities developed comfort with boats and water from their earliest years. Boys learned to row and sail as naturally as inland children learned to ride horses or drive oxen. Girls understood tides and weather signs, helped mend nets, and knew which fish appeared in which seasons. This immersion in maritime life created populations for whom the boundary between land and sea felt permeable and navigable rather than absolute, fostering cultural identities fundamentally shaped by water's presence. As evening approached and fishing boats returned to harbor, the daily rhythm of maritime life reached its conclusion. With catches sorted and sold, vessels secured, and gear prepared for the next day's work. This pattern had repeated itself for millennia and would continue long into the future, forming the constant heartbeat of coastal existence beneath the dramatic events of naval battles and merchant expeditions. The accumulated effect of these countless ordinary voyages represented seafaring's deepest influence on human civilization, weaving water and boats into the fundamental texture of daily experience for millions of people across the ancient world. As we reach the end of our journey through the ancient world of seafaring, we find ourselves standing at the water's edge once more, looking out across the same seas that called to our ancestors thousands of years ago. The waves that lap against modern shore carry within them the memory of every voyage, every discovery, every innovation that brought humanity from those first tentative moments on floating logs to the mastery of entire oceans. The legacy left by those ancient mariners lives on in ways both obvious and subtle. When we look at any boat today, we see echoes of designs refined over millennia. The fundamental principle of the hull, shaped to move efficiently through water while providing stability, was perfected through countless generations of trial and observation. The Egyptians who learned to shape papyrus into seaworthy vessels, the Phoenicians who discovered the advantages of keeled ships, the Greeks who calculated the perfect proportions for speed and strength. All of them contributed to a body of knowledge that would never be lost. Navigation techniques developed without instruments by ancient sailors demonstrated a profound understanding of the natural world. The practice of reading stars, observing wave patterns, and noting the behavior of seabirds created a foundation for all maritime wayfinding that followed. Even today, when satellites guide ships across oceans with precision unimaginable to ancient captains, the basic principles remain unchanged. The stars still wheel overhead in their predictable patterns. Currents still follow paths shaped by coastlines and ocean depths. And experienced sailors still read the sea with senses honed by attention and practice. The trade routes established by Phoenician merchants, expanded by Greek sailors, and secured by Roman fleets, became the arteries through which civilization itself flowed. These weren't merely paths across water. They were connections between peoples, conduits for ideas, and channels through which cultures influenced one another in ways that shaped human history. The tin routes that brought metal from distant shores, the grain shipments that fed great cities, the amphorae of wine and oil that traveled from port to port. Each cargo represented not just commerce, but cultural exchange. Languages borrowed words from one another at dockside markets. Artistic styles and techniques traveled with goods. Stories and knowledge moved from shore to shore, enriching every society they touched. The engineering achievements of ancient shipbuilders established principles that would guide construction for centuries. The discovery that certain wood types resisted water damage better than others, the development of joinery techniques that created watertight seams, the understanding of how weight distribution affected stability. These weren't written in textbooks, but were instead passed down through apprenticeship, from master craftsmen to students who would spend their lives working with timber and rope. The shipyards of Tyre and Athens and Carthage and Rome functioned as centers of accumulated expertise, where decades of experience informed every decision about how a vessel should be built. Roman maritime organization introduced systematic approaches to sea control that influenced naval thinking for millennia afterward. The concept of permanent fleets stationed at strategic locations, the coordination of convoy systems to protect merchant vessels, the use of maritime power to project influence and maintain security. All of these became models for later civilizations. The administrative structures developed to supply and maintain Roman fleets, the training systems for crews, the integration of maritime power with land-based military strategy. These represented sophisticated thinking about sea power that recognized its importance to empire. Perhaps most significantly, ancient seafaring represented a fundamental shift in human capability and consciousness. When the first mariners pushed away from shore and trusted themselves to the open water, they crossed not just a physical boundary, but a psychological one. They accepted risk in pursuit of opportunity. They observed, experimented, and learned from both success and misfortune. They developed technologies and techniques through persistent effort across generations, each improvement building on what came before. This process of gradual mastery through collective effort would become a template for human advancement in countless other domains. The ancient world's relationship with the sea also fostered particular qualities of character and community. Seafaring demanded cooperation, as no individual could manage a vessel alone. It required trust, as crew members depended on one another for survival. It encouraged resilience, as the sea tested sailors constantly with its unpredictable moods. And it developed a form of courage that wasn't reckless but calculated, the willingness to face danger when experience and skill suggested success was possible. These qualities, cultivated in maritime communities around the Mediterranean and beyond, became part of the cultural fabric of civilizations that built their prosperity on sea trade. As centuries passed and the ancient world gave way to new eras, the knowledge accumulated by early seafarers was never abandoned, but instead continuously refined. Medieval sailors built upon Roman and Greek foundations. Age of exploration voyagers benefited from navigation techniques with ancient roots. Even the modern ships that cross oceans today carry within their designs principles first discovered by builders working with simple tools on Mediterranean shores thousands of years ago. The archaeological evidence that reveals ancient seafaring to us, the preserved hulls found in harbour mud, the anchors recovered from ancient wrecks, the detailed ship images painted on tomb walls and pottery, connects us directly to those who went before. When researchers study a Phoenician shipwreck or examine the remains of a Roman grain carrier, they're not merely recovering artifacts, but retrieving stories, recovering the lived experience of people who devoted their lives to mastering their craft. Each discovery adds detail to our understanding, filling in the picture of how ancient peoples accomplished what they did with the resources available to them. As you drift towards sleep tonight, perhaps you might imagine standing on an ancient shore at dawn, watching a vessel prepare to depart. The crew moves with practiced efficiency, their actions shaped by knowledge accumulated over generations. The sail, woven from flax or wool, catches the morning breeze. The hull, crafted from timber selected for its qualities and shaped with careful attention to proven designs, sits securely in the water. The captain, guided by stars and experience and the wisdom of countless voyages before, sets a course toward the horizon. The journey they undertake is made possible by every innovation, every lesson learned, every small improvement contributed by mariners throughout history. They are the inheritors of humanity's long relationship with the sea, carrying forward a legacy that began when the first of our ancestors looked at water and imagined a way across. And in their wake, that legacy continues, flowing forward through time like the eternal movement of waves upon the shore. As we bring to a close our journey through humanity's ancient conquest of the seas, from those first humble reed boats to the magnificent triremes that ruled the waves, we hope these tales of brave seafarers and distant horizons have gently carried you toward peaceful rest. Thank you for joining us on this calm exploration across time and tide. If these quiet adventures have brought you comfort, we'd love to have you with us again. Please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below to help other smart sleepers find their way to restful nights. And now, as the night deepens and your mind settles like a ship finding harbor, we wish you the sweetest of dreams. Good night, fellow dreamer, and may your sleep be restful and your dreams be kind.